I'm Mark Z, and you're watching Thorin, the best interviewer behind Travis Gafford.
Right, this is going to be the first episode, maybe the only episode, who knows, don't know how this is going to go yet, of a show called The People versus LS, which actually, in theory, is named that way to be based on, like, you know, when you have a court case, it's like the people of the state of New York versus so-and-so. But I actually also conceived of it from that straight fire non-album track that Kanye did, where everyone was just going in on him for all political shit, and he was like trying to like respond to people and stuff. So I thought a similar concept, because obviously LS is someone who is known to, I don't even like to use phrases like controversial because they just become such loaded terms, just has his own opinions about League of Legends. And as you'd expect, I've had a lot of experience with this myself. There's a lot of people out there who are just any random viewer. They could be a really smart viewer. They could be a complete pleb who knows nothing. And for some weird reason, they always have this sense that like they're entitled to like debate any topic with you. So if they tweet you, you're supposed to reply to them. If they say something on Twitter or Reddit, you're supposed to say something. Like if they say something in Twitch chat, you're a coward if you don't respond to them. But the problem with that is like, it would just be madness to just reply to a million random people. So instead what I thought is, let's make a show where the whole point is, within reason, people can call in and actually have discussions about stuff. So if people really want to give their best explanations to why they don't think Jin Air Green Wings could beat G2, then they can do that. But the point is, as someone who's hosted a lot of TV shows over my time, TV shows, I mean, just Twitch host podcasts or whatever, one of the problems is if you just have two people and they argue, people tend to just tunnel so much on their points that they lose all the basic decorum and politeness you actually need to set up a proper discussion that's interesting to anyone except someone looking for drama and a train wreck, basically. So within reason, we're going to take people's calls now, and people are absolutely welcome to disagree with LS, to argue with LS. It can even get a bit fun, a bit spicy, but we're going to keep it within bounds, though. It's not going to be like that segment of LS on, what was it called, like Thorin and Loco do worlds or whatever the fuck, where it was just you and Loco arguing for like 25 minutes about like the first 10 minutes of game one of Afrika versus C9, which is probably the worst discussion ever had in the history of League of Legends. Like, even whatever points you were making were devalued by the fact that no one wanted to hear like the same point going over and over and over and over again. And then obviously the other problem, this is why I wanted to be a moderator for some players, is you don't want people's like own personal idiosyncrasies to overshadow their point. Right. Sometimes it helps to have someone else who can say, so is this the point you're making? Right. And then you put that to the person and you get an actual response. So the concept to start out with is, obviously we've never done this before. So it is going to be initially a little bit tricky getting the people into the calls, making sure people's time lasts a certain amount of time, doesn't go too far. So we're going to generally let it run on the first one a little bit. If you get boring, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, I am the boss of this show. Like if someone's boring on it, they're just really obnoxious, we'll just kick you out the call. And I don't really give a fuck. Like, write to your senator. Maybe contact the UN fucking Human Rights Council or something. I don't really give a fuck. You are not obliged to be on this show. But we'll try and get the first people. So what we thought was, the way we'll do the first episode is we'll just get a few people now, and we'll have a little like queue of people, like the first 4 people maybe. We'll bring the first person in, we'll do their topic, and we'll know what we want you to do basically is we want to know what the basic topic you want to do is. Make it like a sentence long version of the topic. So what we'll do is, in the chat now, put in, if you personally would like to come and have a discussion now with LS, then tell us now, like, I want to, and then say, like, my topic would be, and then just give it like a 1-sentence version of the topic. So the topic might be, I think Jin Air Green Wings wouldn't beat G2, whatever it might be. We'll pick out the first 3 or 4 now. And then if everything goes well, bring the first person in, and then we'll see how it goes. Oh, by the way, anyone wondering, because this part will be in the VOD, obviously, it's for the explanatory part at the beginning. We can't know that everyone who is really angry at LS and disagrees with them has access to advanced technology like a webcam. So in such a world as they maybe indeed do not, from whatever basement type dwelling they currently reside in, then we obviously need a placeholder to represent them. So what you can see on your screen now is I created a piece of artwork that I chose. I ruminated, I reflected upon what it means to be the kind of person who might disagree with LS and want to argue with him. And this was the visual representation I came up with. This is how my soul spoke to you people. This is who you are to us. Now, if you have a webcam, you're welcome to turn that motherfucker on and show us why only your mother could love you. But if you don't want to, can just have this image up here, and we can just keep it nice and polite, can't we? I would just say, listen, I'll just give everyone a tip right now. If you have a webcam and you look normal, just put it on. It'll be fun. If you look like some shit out of a sewer and you talk shit, I'm not one of these people who considers like low blows a thing. Like, we'll go in on your appearance. Like, I don't even give a fuck. Like, just going to say that's a warning we're going to put out there. So, okay, let's just have a look at the chat now if we've had any initial reasonable ones. Let's see. And no, by the way, I'll go ahead and give everyone a little spoiler. We won't be behind the scenes in advance asking friends of ours who are celebrities to call in and then pretend it's a legitimate call in as though we're actually a late night talk show host and we're so popular that, hey, someone famous is calling. Like, we're not going to be doing any of that shit. Like, this isn't a fake show. This is a real show, okay, where real idiots talk about real things with real LS. That's it. That's the show, okay. So in light of that, let's look at what the first one should be. What I'll do is I'll pick a couple now, LS, and then tell me if one of these sounds good and we'll see what looks good. All right, here's one. This isn't that terrible. I mean, he wasn't that subtle with how he phrased it, but what about this one? It says, I want to talk about LS and his ranking and why he thinks he should be able to coach and is better than people better than him. I'll just go ahead and give you know what? Congratulations. You're the first person we featured on this show. I'm just going to go ahead and give you a little tip. At least pretend that you're not a hater to get through the door. At least, for just one sentence, make it sound reasonable. Like, what you could have done there is say, like, I'd like to discuss, LS's perception of himself as a coach and what he sees as his position in the community. You can make all the same points, but when you put in phrasing like, why does he think he should be able to coach? Well, he doesn't live in a totalitarian fucking future where, like, fucking the government's releasing attack helicopters to come and kill him now because he's coaching. So, like, even the way you phrase that is ridiculous. But yeah, what do you think? If that guy can keep his shit together, should we bring him on?
Yeah, that's fine.
Because I think this one sounds spicy to start out with. So he can basically be the equivalent of that guy on the first night at Shawshank Prison who goes in there and starts crying. It's like someone has to know the way the rules are run. So let's go ahead and run this one. So, right, what name do you want us to call you? Come on, man. What's the hesitation? Just John? How about that? John? Is that your, I don't know. Yeah. Come on, tell us your name. What name would you want? It can be a fake one if you want. What do you want us to call you?
Rick. Can I be Rick?
Rick?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So our first guest, people can use anonymous names here. They don't have to use the real list they've done. So we're going to call him Rick for the purposes of doing so because, probably appropriate, right? The sort of person who calls into the show probably is the sort of person who identifies with Rick from Rick and Morty and imagines himself to be some sort of human intelligence who possibly has more knowledge than all the rest of us. So here's the position, right? Can you restate for us what your basic topic is, Rick? What would you say, like, the basic initial point is?
I don't like Rick. Can you call me Trey instead?
I'll go ahead and tell you right now, mate. I got a real hair trigger for people who annoy me, so I'll just stick with Rick for now. So we'll stick with Rick. Go ahead. Tell me the topic.
Wait, can I just start by saying that I'm not a hater? Like, I've been watching this for a couple of years.
Fair enough.
And
fair
it's
enough, mate.
Something that I noticed as I was watching. So
okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Right. So what's the premise?
All right. So basically, I don't have all my facts together.
That's okay.
But from what I've noticed, like, recently, I'm pretty sure LS has been in, like, about D1 to D2. I think he had Masters promos, but he also duos for everything.
Okay.
And then, I might be wrong here, but I think that when he was in NA, he peaked about, like, Diamond 1, Diamond 2. Is that correct?
Well, listen, we'll establish all this in a sec. Just keep going with your point, and then we'll start out. Yeah, it's okay.
So basically, I'm asking him why, if he has, like, if I haven't seen him reach Challenger, I haven't seen him reach Masters really. Why does he consider himself, like, as in more of a position to tell people that he is, that, like, his decision making is beyond theirs when they're at a higher place in the game?
Right, wait one sec. So just to check, so that last part there is what threw me a little bit. So we're not talking about when he does, like, coaching with someone in silver, right?
No.
So when you say higher, is LS actually coaching, like, challenger players? I'm unaware of this. Does he ever do that?
He's a coach for.
Oh, you mean as a professional coach, not just on his stream?
But I've also seen him coach challengers, and, like, when you watch his reviews.
Okay.
Players that are
right. So first of all, LS,
Yeah.
This will probably help for this episode because I imagine there's a few people who have a similar thing. 'Cause it's a famous thing people always say on Reddit. Like, I think he was just boosted to Masters, whatever, on Korea. So let's just start with the initial facts, right?
Yeah.
So LS, what is the highest that you, well, like, for example, what are you now on Korean solo queue? Like when you most recently played, what was your highest rank?
Highest rank? Master 220.
And that was recently?
No, that wasn't recent. That was, well, no, it's within the last year.
Okay, right. When you do that,
Yeah.
how often do you duo with other players? Just roughly.
Whenever I come off of breaks, I tend to like to duo with friends or just people that are around, mostly because I have lapses of activity, whether it be because of casting or coaching or just breaks or an activity.
Okay.
And it lessens the stress from having to play solo queue and just doing it solo because it's not
Right.
the focal point of my stream.
Sure. Just bear with us a sec, Rick. We're just establishing the facts here, mate. Then he can answer your question. So when you duo, when you say with people who are around, like how often, like so give me like a rough percentage. How often do you think you duo with people out of all these solo queue games that are ranked?
I
Just
would
rough
say,
number, ballpark.
God, I don't even know. Maybe half.
50%. Okay, we'll go with 50% for now.
Yeah.
Of the 50%, how much of the 50% is people who are ranked as high or better than you? Like how many are just friends? How many actually like semi-pros? How many are top Korean players? Most of them?
I guess that's a two-part question. They're challenger on NA or EU, but some of them are lower than me on Korea. So there's that, and then there's obviously the Korean friends that I'll play with that are higher.
Okay. So let me think. Where were we going after this? Okay, so actually, I'll just ask you initially, just a very quick version, because like I say, people ask about this often. What would you actually say, Alice, to people who think basically that even your ranks aren't legit, like you were boosted to them, or the right person? Like I don't know what the conspiracy theory is, but they would assume that you got boosted by people who are better. What would you just say to that initially? Quick answer.
Well, I mean, the knee-jerk response is that there's tons of examples. I mean. There's plenty of players that come here to boot camp, whether it be during Worlds boot camps or MSI boot camps or just off-season boot camps, etc. They all play with each other at the same exact MMR threshold that I'm playing at. So why are they not held to the same standard or criticized in the same manner for duoing with teammates or just whatever? But then in addition to that, why is the rank that I have relevant relative to coaching or whatnot when there's so many.
Topic, don't worry. Yeah, let's get into that then. Okay, so we'll transition to the question that Rick had. I just wanted to establish all that stuff because there's no point leaving it up in the air. So the whole point of the show is you can actually get Ellis's thoughts. So as Rick said, basically, when you are a coach, both in a professional capacity for BBQ, where I'm going to go ahead and assume you will acknowledge those players are better than you as individual players, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're better players than you. And also, if, as he says, one other thing. When you were playing in NA, did you ever reach Challenger?
No.
Okay, so as he says, say you had an NA Challenger player who you're coaching or a professional player, right? What is your reasoning? Why do you think that you are, let's say, qualified to coach those people? If indeed, individually, in this particular case, we will acknowledge they are better players than you. Why are you qualified to coach them?
Well, coaching isn't knowledge in League of Legends is not linear. But then, in addition to that, coaching isn't telling someone everything that they don't know or inherently knowing more than them on every single topic, but rather adjusting or guiding them. Although I do think that for the most part, with what I do on stream, which I'm assuming that he's referring to, and I know that you asked him about. I do coach challengers on stream and solo queue games and whatnot. The servers are entirely different, but then also with the statement about knowledge is not linear. You can have a comprehensive understanding of LoL. You can offer things that people haven't considered before. You can play devil's advocate. You can get them to think about things in different ways. Pretty much that.
Okay, right, Rick, you want to come in here, mate? Is there a more probing version of that question, or is there some angle that you want to take on something he said there, mate?
I had a question for him.
Yeah, come on.
If you have like the knowledge, if you have a higher understanding of knowledge to like that point, then how come? And I'm not no flame, because there are mechanical champions or non-mechanical champions. So
Sure.
if you take that point out, then how come you can't reach the highest levels if you have all the knowledge that you need?
I mean, there's a million factors, right?
Okay.
Mechanics in game are obviously something. Ability to utilize in game what you can know in a slowed state. Emotional discipline, emotional control. What's the terminology for it? The ability, like recalling information and then being able to utilize it on spot, but also that they're different skill sets, being able to isolate or break down things in a moment, talk about all the pieces together, yada yada yada. But in the same sense, in regards to the thing about like challenger, right? Well, I already referenced that there are NA and EU challenger players that are lower than me on Korea. So
Sure.
then I don't know what your rebuttal is to that, because you're using this metric that challenger is a high tier, it's an exalted tier that comes with an implied amount of game knowledge, but that's just simply not true, because there's so many examples of challengers that are just completely clueless on all servers even. And there's other ways to climb tiers and whatnot by being very proficient or good at very isolated things. And
Sure.
so I mean,
What about this then? Let me ask you a question, Rick. When he says there that, for example, there's like, for example, if you, I don't know what team you support, but let's say it was Cloud9 or G2 from your, these teams that always go to Worlds, basically. When you see those Reddit threads that are like, oh, look, Perks is in Masters 2 after only a week on the Korean server. What LS is saying basically is, well, most of the time when they go to those boot camps, they also duo with each other for exactly that reason. They want to, boost as fast as they can to get to the high levels. Then they can get proper individual practice, right? So do you actually care if pro players do that? Is that an issue for you?
Fair enough.
No, I mean, I just wondered, do you care about that?
No, and I think that a pro player, if they had the same amount of games as no flame, if they had the same amount of games.
It can be flame if you want, mate. Just you don't have to keep saying that. That's like, keep going. Sorry.
Okay, all right. So I feel like if they had the same amount of games over time, regardless, they would get to a higher division than him.
Well, I mean, I think that's pretty much taken for granted that Perks would do better than LS in Korean solo queue. My point was just does it bother you if they say they're in that ranking? Apparently it doesn't. It's okay, fair enough. I'll be honest, I don't think about that either, so probably not something we consider. What about this then? So when you say the way you phrased it was obviously why should he be allowed to coach? Quick question again is, do you think that other coaches of pro teams, do they have to have some minimum threshold in your mind? Should they be a certain rank or should they have played as a pro? What's your opinion on that?
Give me a second to think about it.
Sorry, I didn't hear you there, mate. Did you say you need to think a second?
Yeah.
Yeah, give it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem.
All right. I think that if you're going to coach someone, then if you're going to coach a pro team, I think, you yourself should be a pro or at one of the highest levels because you're coaching people at the highest level. I know pro play is different than solo queue.
Yeah.
But it's hard to... Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I just offered you the knowledge that there are challengers on NA and EU that are lower than me in Diamond Korea. It's a very frequent occurrence. The onus isn't on me to look up all the accounts. I mean, I remember one time this happened on stream. I had a notepad file, I believe, during the Worlds boot camps with 40 accounts in it, and a lot of players with 150 plus games with Riot gifted accounts, which MMR starts at Z2. They all just happened to be in Diamond. and they were playing with each other. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't people that get Masters or get Challenger. But in a different sense, there's been so many pro players that have gone on record saying how difficult Korean solo queue is. I mean, I've had Whippo on my stream multiple times say that D3 Korea is harder than Challenger EU West. There was a person that I was IRL coaching a couple of months ago. He was stuck in D3, D4 Korea. He's currently top 50 on EU West. So when you're saying that you should be a pro yourself or be playing at a really high level, again, it's relative. It's also not my job to play the game all the time, right? I cast and I coach.
Sure.
And I stream.
But Rick, basically, the reason I asked, like, do you care about other coaches is because, like, I mean, I'm assuming you understand that I could find you the majority of pro coaches in League of Legends and nowhere close to the level that their best player would be, even in solo queue. And as you say, obviously, even being top of Challenger isn't the same as being like a top level pro. So I'm assuming you'd acknowledge that most of those people aren't as good as their star players, right?
Right.
So basically, what I wonder about this question is this: even though you said no flame, like, by the way, I know you're saying that because like obviously we came hard at the beginning and say we'll kick everyone if they're rude. I mean, you have to be like obnoxious to get kicked for that, mate. Don't worry about flame in that sense. You can definitely say you don't agree with LS or whatever. But my question is this: it seems to me like if I actually asked you, do you care that Coleman's not as good as Faker? Of course not. Do you care that Six isn't as good as Bjergsen? Of course not. It doesn't matter, right? You would still allow them to be a coach. So basically, it seems to me, this is my question for you, like it's more LS specifically, like something about the way LS speaks or the way he presents himself, something about that triggers you and it makes you think like, does he think he knows everything or does he think he knows better than top players? Is it something in this kind of field? Am I on with that?
No, I mean, he's like the only person I watch that's a coach. So
Okay.
He's like the only one that I can really like talk from watching.
Okay.
Okay,
what about this then? Do you think when he gives like advice to people who, as you say, are better than him at the game, is he like faking? Does he pretend to know more than he knows? Is he like tricking them into thinking he knows more? What do you think?
No, I think that, like he said earlier, there are certain angles that he can get that you can't see while you're in a game. But I also think that if they reviewed their own gameplay of that same game, they could have came up with the same thing.
Oh, by the way, I would agree with you on that. Like, here's the thing, mate, is you are right in theory. In theory, Faker could be the best coach for Faker. Like, if Faker really had the time in the day to watch all of his games, to study other games of other players, to think about it all, if on the side he could build up his own coaching history where he understood how to work, explain things to people, he could probably be the best coach. The problem is, like, the fact he could do that doesn't mean he can. Doesn't mean he literally has the real time to do it now. He probably wouldn't, and he probably wouldn't put in the effort to learn to be a coach and stuff. So, like, realistically, I get what you mean. Like, in theory, they probably could do it. But, I mean, I could also, walk to the airport instead of taking a taxi, couldn't I? I'm going to take a taxi because I'm not going to fucking walk. So, like, I don't really know So, okay, what about this then? Before we end this segment, because I think we got the basic premise out, is there any part you think we haven't addressed quite yet that you want LS to touch on?
Well, I have a question for him.
Oh, sure.
I have a question for him. Do you know the solo queue rating of other analytical casters and coaches?
Nope. You're the only one I watch.
All right.
Well, I don't understand this. Like, I know what's weird is I kind of believe you. You do sound like you actually are a fan of LS's, but on some weird level, I don't know what. Okay, what about this then? Last question is this then, Rick. What's like the real issue here then? Like, what's the problem with this situation? Was it just a genuine question? I'm a bit confused because you seemed a bit aggressive when you made the comment in Twitch chat. You've been a lot more polite here, but like, what is the crux of the issue? What is LS getting away with that we have to stop?
I mean, maybe I don't understand, like, because I literally tuned into this like a minute after it started, so I didn't know, like, I thought we were just discussing topics, and it was just something I thought about.
No,
I didn't know if it was supposed to be like a debate.
No, you don't have to come at him. It's just the way you phrased it. I thought you were coming at him. Don't worry.
I was just trying to type it fast.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I would just say this, along with what LS said. I would just say, like, the key. I think probably the best point he made there is two factors. One is that knowledge isn't linear. And what he means by that is don't think of League of Legends knowledge like you start with book 1 and that's the basic things. And then book 2 is a bit more advanced. And, Faker's on book 50. And let's say Caps is on book 45. And, I'll put in a joke like, fucking Kiwi Kids on book 3 with all the pictures and stuff. Like, in that scenario, you'd be right. If LS isn't at number 45, how can he tell Caps what to do? But what he's kind of saying there is, it's more like, think about knowledge in school. Like, you could go to school and you could spend the next 8 years studying economics, right? But if I went and spent 4 years studying history, I studied half as long as you, but I'm going to know way more about history than you do, even though you know way more about economics than I do. So basically, I think me and LS generally would agree. That's kind of his premise, is like what he's thinking he can coach people on is things they haven't thought to think of. Or maybe he has a technique to explain something that, yeah, they might know on some level, but they wouldn't be able to think of in the game, or they wouldn't think of afterwards. Like, oh, right, I see why that's wrong. So that's kind of the principle he's trying to sort of get to, I think, there, basically. So anyway, thanks for the first segment, mate. Everything good?
Right. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Cheers.
Wait, I wanted to say, Chow was asking for my rank. So I just want to say, I know LS is better than me, like, undoubtedly.
Oh, don't worry about that, mate. Don't worry. It doesn't matter what your rank is. That's fine. That's cool. All right, thank you anyway.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good day. Thanks for the discussion.
It's all right. What does scuffed mean, by the way?
I guess yeah, I guess it is kind of recent. Scuffed just means like it's not very. Oh, this is interesting. You're asking me to define it on the spot, and I guess I can't do it in a.
I mean, in theory, the word in English would just mean it's like, it's a bit dirty, like it's scratched or whatever. It's not clean.
Yeah,
Something along those lines?
Unclean. Or not refined. Okay. Not refined, yeah. Because the overlays.
Bear in mind, that was the first one, and the guy's never been on, and he hasn't seen anyone else do it. I thought it was reasonable.
No,
He turned out to be fairly polite in the end.
Yeah, he was.
I think he was maybe a bit misguided with his initial premise, but whatever. Right, let me have a look here. Let's see. Okay, I've got a good one here. What I'll do is I'll take a couple that look good from the chat, and then what we'll do is I'll ask you, and also maybe what we'll do is for the first couple, it'll be me and LS will pick them, and then we might do like a viewer's choice one where I give you all like 3 choices, and you can all pick which one you want, and then we'll let you plebs actually have a decision as to who it is. Let's have a look here. So the first one was the question is game theory optimal play versus exploitable play. Sounds like an interesting topic. There's one.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Is coaching teachable? Like, can you teach someone to become a coach? There's one. I think those are 2 not bad ones. Let's have a look. I'll pick one more and then we'll pick one of the 3. Okay, I've got a good one here. Like, the other third one is, I mean, the way he phrased this is pretty wild, but okay. He put, your style of in-game coaching at times is degrading and ultimately can be harmful to the player. Now, that's not actually a question. I don't know if any of you out there, like this is grade 2 or something, like a question mark needs to be on the end. And again, like you may as well just say there, like, LS, you are ugly. Like that, you're not going to bring you on to discuss that, are we? Like you'd have to say, why are you ugly? That'd at least be the start of the thing. And even then that'd be too rude. So, right, of these 3 first ones, optimal play versus exploitable play. So I think a topic people often bring up about you, do you go too hard on what you should do? Can you teach coaching or your in-game style of coaching? I think we might even do the in-game. Because the thing is, that guy, I can't lie, I like battle. So if people come with a little bit of spice, I don't mind that. So what we'll do, how about we do the game theory one first? I think that's a good one.
The game theory one's the best, I think.
Get him in here now.
You know what would have been a pretty funny thing for the last guy is people on stream recently have pulled up my duo win rate with people that I play with. Most of them are negative. Which means that I actually climb more when I'm solo.
All I would say, by the way, I mean, this part probably won't be in the actual VOD, it's just random throw it. I don't know, maybe I'll edit this in. I would just say to people, because that's a very, very common like criticism of LS, is they claim that like your rank is fake and you've just duoed and you secretly, like the problem is they never actually explain what level they really think you are, which is kind of key. Like if they think you really should be, I don't know, fucking gold or plat or something, they should probably say so, because the implication that carries is pretending to be better than you are. And the weird thing about that, I would just say this to people out there is this. There are plenty of players, coaches, even commentators who aren't big fans of LS. Why did none of them ever use that as the point to call him out on? If basically he was the equivalent of someone who bought 200k Twitter followers, someone big's going to call you out eventually. Someone's going to notice that. So I would just say that. Right. The reason why that's not that great an angle is the fact that no one calls him out on that probably suggests that like the pros, etc., think it's legit. So I've always thought it was a bit of a whack angle. Anyway. Right, what name do you want us to call you? Pick any name. It's up to you. It can be your real alias, can be fake.
Just look at this.
Okay, so this guy's alias is going to be look at this. And he was the question. I'll remind everyone. It was basically game theory optimal play versus exploitable play. So set it up for us then, look at this. What do you mean by this premise? Like, what's the core of what you talk about here?
So I have a bit of a background as a professional poker player, and also I've played a lot of chess. And
are you from Germany?
Yes.
Okay, just checking. That's all right. Listen, we take all kinds here. We're very forgiving. So
yeah, and
come on then. Tell us your thoughts.
LS makes a lot of points about trying to play game theory optimal.
Yes.
The first point I want to make is that I don't think he knows what game theory optimal play looks like.
Okay.
Because it's very hard to know what it looks like. We are not machines. And the second point is that game theory optimal play might be impossible to achieve for a human to play. And it might be better to try and play exploitable. And he always makes the point that people have to try and play perfect. While he loves chess analogies, the pro chess players like Magnus Carlsen or something, they stress on the points that they are not perfect, that they are humans, that they can't play perfect, and that they also, when they do analysis with computers, they try to look for a line, chess variant, that is hard for a human to play. It must that it might not be the best line to play, but that it is the line that looks hard for a human to play. So
Right.
they factor into that they try to play exploitable, but make it harder for the opponent to play against.
Okay. So there's two parts there. So let's go to the first one, which was it was about was the first one something like, why does he think that it's even...
That he even knows what a perfect play looks like.
So basically it's like an epistemological question. Like, is it even possible for a human to know what the perfect play is?
Exactly. Like,
right.
He makes this point about chess evolving constantly with AlphaZero and stuff. And with AlphaZero, we saw that Stockfish wasn't the best. So we don't even know in chess, a perfect information game, what the best play looks like. So why would we ever know it for an imperfect information game?
Okay. So LS, right? Let's go question by question here. So that first premise, right? You should probably tell us initially, do you actually perceive yourself that way? If you had to describe your style of coaching, do you stress like the concept of the optimal play, the game theory, like ideal way to play the game? Is that something you consider part of your way of thinking?
For professional play especially, I'm a very big advocate of looking at freeze frames of spots and trying to deduce what if all 5 champions or all 10 champions in the game are capable of human-like level, because obviously I acknowledge that scripting exists and I don't ask players to do scripter-like movement or things that would require them to do inhuman things in order for the macro plays to work. I try to ask what the 10 champions can do, and I throw that out as an assertion, and what I wait for is a rebuttal based on what the champions can do at a rudimentary level, not what scripters can do. And I want to keep refining on that.
Okay. Do you have any, like, come back to that? Or do you want to go deeper on that? What do you think? Look at this.
There's sometimes situations where the perfect play just is very complicated. And if a very good team, like let's say SKT, the perfect play is very risky, and making it would open you up for counterplay and making mistakes, which in turn would lower your win rate. I'm not sure if you understand what I mean with that. Let's say there's an all-in situation in lane where you can all-in your opponent, but if you misplay, just cancel one auto attack, you die, and then the play is bad. There is the point to be made that you shouldn't make that play against weaker players, because you will outplay them on later stages and accumulate advantages that way, rather than just trying to maximize your value in that specific spot. And that is something that I think he totally disregards, and I don't think you should always strive for perfect play.
Okay.
It will open you up you will make mistakes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay, right. What about that then, Ellis? What do you think of this?
Well, I think
it's a very abstract topic, obviously. What do you think?
I think he didn't listen to the part where I said that I acknowledge that the players aren't scripters, because if they were scripters, I would ask them to do things like hit every single skill shot to the point where it would come down to one auto attack, and I would ask them to do that 99% of the time or 100% of the time. So I think that's disingenuous.
But But you can abstract it a bit. Sorry for interrupting you, but you can use it on another level, like for team comps. If you look at what a bots would play for team comp, it would probably be something poke heavy that relies on perfect mechanics. So, and you talk a lot about draft being bad for other teams, but you disregard how the draft can be played out for other teams. So, like how easy the team comp is played.
The problem with this, I can tell you already, because I remember I don't know some of the topics you're going to say, and I haven't watched every stream LS has ever done. So I myself am like the viewer trying to understand the topic that you're discussing. The problem with when you say that, look at this, is like that's a really vague comment. Like I can't even imagine. Can you get like, you know a bit about League? I'm assuming, right? Do you follow the game pretty heavily?
Yeah.
Could you give us like a theoretical example of like what, like where? Like either you remember a draft or or you could make one up now. Like give us an example of what you think LS does, and then he can tell you what he thinks of that. Can you give us an example?
I don't remember a specific time now, but it's like a general thing he does is that he always talks about perfect play and stresses it a lot on his stream.
Okay.
He says that he gives he makes it like he does know what perfect play is like. I think that's not possible that he knows what perfect play is.
Okay, let's start there then. So LS, right? What would you say to that then? Like, would you agree? I've heard you mention many times concept of game theory or optimal play. Like, is it something like you generally? Is it a stress of yours? Do you think it's a thing that you should consider?
I never say that it's the perfect play. In my initial response to his questions, I said that I assert something I believe to be the most optimal. But I acknowledge that it can't be perfect because in order for it to be perfect, by nature, the players would have to be scripters. But even then...
I will say, right, I'll tell everyone a joke for a second that might explain what I think part of the misunderstanding here is. So, when did you first start following League? Look at this.
I think in season 4 or something.
In that case, you will remember this player, but you might remember that. Do you remember the German player Yellow Pete, the AD carry for?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Right, I'll give you an example. Because he was also German, right? And he also, the way he talked reminded me of the way you're talking. Because what you're saying, by the way, is very logical. I think it all follows. It seems well-grounded. It's just that I feel like you might be taking what LS says as hyperbole, like literally. Because here's the story, okay? So I was at LCS when the Evil Geniuses team was playing. And I can't remember if this was from an interview that someone mentioned this, but someone said to Yellow Pete, they said to him, who do you think is going to win this game? No, that's it. They made the mistake of not saying, who do you think is going to win this game? They said, who's going to win this game? And Yellow Pete was like, I don't know. And then they were like, well, no, but, who do you think it'll be? And he was like, how could I know? How can I know all possible permutations? I cannot even know what they would start with in the draft. And then even if I knew what they would start with in the draft, how could I know what the first buff would be? And then the team fight, how would I know? And it's like, we were all just like, dude, you honestly not get what he's saying. Like, he's just mean, like, what's your guess? Like, obviously we all know he couldn't really calculate all the permutations. So, like, I just want to check. When you say LS always stresses that, like, do you think he's being genuine? Do you think he really thinks he knows, like, the perfect possible player, that he knows, like, if you had a computer simulation, what the ideal scenario would be? Is that the assertion you want to make?
I mean, he is a very polarizing person. He makes a lot of claims that I disagree with. That's one thing. And so I think, yes, he does think he's the best coach, and he does think that he knows what perfect play looks like. Close to perfect play.
I will just say, just as a little tip for everyone out there, terms like controversial, outspoken, polarizing are just loaded terms, by the way, because like what League of Legends analyst in the world does everyone agree with? I don't know anyone. I mean, I heard Papa Smithy trying to talk about SK Telecom could play every style of fucking League of Legends and they would be really sick early game. Did you see any of that at the MSI? I didn't see fucking any of it. I saw Azael and fucking Raz predict Team Liquid to beat G2 in a best of 5. Like, I've seen all sorts of shit. Now, is Azael a polarizing, controversial person? I'd probably say not. I think what happens is if you just don't like someone's opinion, you say it's polarizing. Like, what you really mean is he's polarized you because you're the opposite pole to him. But whatever, we'll put that by the by for a second. LS, do you ever make these claims?
Well, I've said twice now that I don't claim that it's perfect play. You keep saying that.
Expand a bit then. What about this then? What about this? when you do make a comment like optimal play, what do you mean by that? Like presumably, you can't actually. You would agree with this guy. Right? You can't actually know what the perfect game theory plays. Right? No one can really.
Right. So basically, what I said is that I try to take all of my understanding of the game and I throw out an assertion based on what I believe the champions are capable of doing. And I wait for a rebuttal to an alternative that can exist that operates within the confinements of the game. Like, you can't artificially make, or you can't make Zed deal 50 extra damage. You can't make him move 50 MS faster. You said that you play chess, so if you go back X amount of years and you go and you ask Bobby Fischer what the best move is on a certain board state, he would probably say that he believes that this is the best move on a certain board state. But if you fast forward, not only will machines or current day players probably say that, well, that's not the best move. But the only way that you eventually get to a point where you keep pushing the limits and refining and getting better is by throwing those assertions out there, waiting for them to be challenged logically, again, using the confinements of the game, and then having them refined upon. But you keep conflating this with me saying that it's perfect play, and it's absolutely not. The problem is that oftentimes these arguments only go over well with players who are also able to talk about in an honest discussion what the champions can actually do. Reddit, for instance, thinks every champion has a Twisted Fate ultimate. They think every champion has 100 more MS than it typically does, or that a combo is going to execute a champion. But, pro players won't hold it in the same vein. And so the conversations can be much more honest. So why is it that when I'm simply saying that I'm asserting that I believe that these 10 champions, this map state, this is the best play, is correct, and that I'm waiting for someone to tell me the reason that it might not be the best play without including emotions or without including, the likeliness or the likelihood that a player is going to do this or yada, 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 because that has absolutely nothing to do with analysis or review.
Sure.
That an analysis and review goes out the window because the whole point of analysis and review is to ask, what can the champions do? What can these characters do on this game? How do we chase perfection and obtain excellence? But you seem to be really bothered or annoyed that I'm trying to think about not who the best players are right now and chase up to them, but I'm trying to think who the best players are 3-5 years from now, and try to chase after that and what that looks like. If you go back into Season 1, Season 2, no one knows what lane swaps are. You try to get junglers and a bot laner or a top laner to coordinate it? Absolutely not. Impossible. But now it's mainstream, common, everyday knowledge. It takes time for things to happen. We're in Season 9 and people still don't free side lanes because they don't understand what's going on there. But it's very easy to go into a VOD, freeze frame, and then ask the question, this team does this, what is this team's response? And then people's knee-jerk reaction to it is, well, so-and-so champion can just go to another lane and create pressure. Well, no, they can't. They don't deal 500 damage because you want them to. They don't move like God across the map. They don't have a TF ultimate on standby. Talk about the actual game.
Well, then my question is, who did you ask? Did you just ask your chat and Reddit, or did you ask someone professional?
I mean,
what do you mean, who did he ask in that sense?
Like he always says, teams should freeze sideways or something.
Okay.
Why does no other team do it? Isn't that an answer?
Wait a second.
Does it?
Wait a second.
They say...
I think I've got to the crux of this. I think I understand your position. So let me ask you if this makes sense, okay? Are you basically, first of all, cut all the stuff about, like, is it possible for humans to understand perfect play? Like, as you can see, that was actually just the initial starting point of this discussion.
Yeah.
I think we all agree that that's the case. No one can really know. But what does make that relevant, I can see why you started there, is basically it sounds to me like you're mildly annoyed with LS because you think when he pauses the VOD and he's like, you could have done this or you should do this, this is the optimal play, that he's thinking that he knows better than the players. But, a pro player, presumably in your mind, is doing what he thinks is the best move anyway. He's trying the highest level player. Now, LS's argument is LS is trying to not be a prisoner of this moment now where we only know what exists in season 9 and what people do right now that works. And for example, I'll give you a great example. So after the group stage of MSI, people might have told you IG has the most correct way to play League of Legends in the whole world, but maybe they don't. Maybe there's actually a team that doesn't have the skill level of IG, but they play a more intelligent macro style, and they would beat IG if they had equal skills. So LS's argument is more that he's just trying to look like, is there something even like a higher concept thing someone could have done, even if this pro player right now doesn't know that he could do it? So what I want to ask basically is it something like that? Like, is there something that annoys you about LS in this sense? Like, what's the gist of this?
Yeah, sure. But the way he phrased it, he pretty much asserted that it is correct to freeze in that moment. But
Yes.
why does no other team do it?
Well, tell me why it's incorrect to freeze.
Because, for example, it would lose tempo on the map.
Okay, how does it lose tempo? Tell me how much damage the champion does. Tell me at what point they can go from point A to point B and have it fit your narrative. You don't get to just say, oh, they can just go create tempo. No, LeBlanc cannot
That's
just go...
That's just a pretty abstract situation.
Absolutely
You're asking
not.
for champion damage. Like, what champion damage? I don't even know what champion...
Listen, look at this. Can I just ask you a question? Like, it sounds to me like LS could say everything he says if he just does one of those. You know, an American... I don't know if you've ever seen American television, but the way they do their adverts is like they have an advert and it's like, does your dick not work? Take this new pill. You're all, look, the wife's coming in and bringing you a cake because of how you fucked her last night. It's brilliant, this isn't it? Oh, now you play with your grandchildren. You've got your vitality back in life. It's new dick hardener pills, TM. And at the end, there's a guy who goes, we'll definitely kill you and possibly make your dick turn into a mutant alien that will leave you in 5 years. And he just says it all really fast at the end, like, and check your insurance provider. And like the whole thing is, right, because they put that disclaimer, they're allowed to do that ridiculous commercial, right? So if LS did a version of that before he spoke, would that like solve the problem? Like if at the beginning he was like, listen, guys, I don't know the perfect players. Like I'm not actually certain. Like, you know, a lot of this is guesswork, but it's my best guess. And so if I say, for example, like you should do this, what I mean is my best guess is you should do that. And I've tried to take into account every other option, but I can't give 50 options. So I'm giving this the most likely. If he did that, would that solve the problem?
No, not really. Like I told you, he asked the question, why is nobody answering why it is bad?
Right.
But the fact that other teams don't do it is an answer in itself. They don't think
I see what you mean. Right.
Like, nobody, you can't think that nobody else ever came to the conclusion that you can freeze a lane. It's standard in a lot of things. Like we saw that when G2 let the inhibitor down or something. That's pretty much a freeze.
So really the problem here is
yes,
that
and it was good.
You don't like his appeal to authority that cause no one's argued against it, like a top team. That doesn't mean he's right automatically.
Exactly.
Right.
Like he thinks it's the perfect play in this, or the best play in this situation, and I disagree with it. I don't think it's the best play. I think it loses a lot of pressure on the map, and you lose a lot of tempo. You probably lose vision because you know one person is in a specific lane. You lose pressure for roaming, etc. And now he just sighs and.
No, I don't just sigh.
Listen, mate. Listen. You are getting a chance to literally have him reply. Like, don't start like you're not literally like this isn't some sort of a camp, mate. And you're like, but what do you mean? Why are you doing that? Bring him in, like, take him to the hall. He sighed at me, like, just calm down on that part of it. Like, LS, come on, respond to what he said, please.
You don't get to say, you don't get to make a blanket statement in response to me saying that teams should freeze lanes. I do not say inherently that they should always just freeze a lane, right? Because this is a pretty interesting thing about me, right? There is no other content creator for professional play that has as much publicly available knowledge. I've been in the spotlight now for 5 years. I'm the only one that constantly puts out, at least in the same amount of volume, the VOD reviews, discussions on stream, etc. And obviously people do this, but I've been doing it for many, many years. And I do that so that people can challenge it and people can correct me if I'm wrong. However, you're not correcting me. You're simply saying, I don't believe that that's the case. They can just go and create tempo elsewhere on the map without actually explaining why they can create tempo. You can't just say that a champion can go somewhere else on the map and create tempo. You have to say why.
I already told you can get vision control back, you can get pressure.
But what does that actually matter?
Should I explain the game in detail to you?
Let me ask you a question. Look at this. Basically, I guess one of the questions that is actually naturally a corollary of what you've asked LS is...
Can I just add one point?
Yeah, go on.
He asks me for the details, but he doesn't provide the details for his lane freeze either.
Yes,
I'll go ahead and tell you right now, mate. You know at the beginning where I said that, like, imagine I'm the viewer. I don't know what the fuck you two are talking about. You're talking about, on the one hand, you both keep addressing some specific lane freeze, yet you refuse to acknowledge which lane freeze it is, and you keep it abstract. So now, as far as I can tell, I'm not joking.
Bot lane or top lane freezes. You don't freeze mid lane.
Okay. Listen, mate. I don't know much about League of Legends, so if you think you can dunk on me, you can go for that, but you're not really going to get much out of this chat, so wait there a second. So this is the question, right? Beyond this abstract concept, one of the things that seems weird is when you say to LS that he's wrong in that sense, like, what is your authority to decide what's right and wrong?
I mean, I'm Grandmaster on EOB, so I'm not bad at the game.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, what should I say? I don't do analysis work.
No, I'm not saying just
for professional team because it wasn't worth it. Like analysts were paid peanuts, so
yeah, fair
there's
enough.
no interest in going into the industry, or at least back in the day there was no interest. I've done analysis work with the right API because I can code.
Okay.
So I know a bit about League of Legends. That's
okay.
It.
This sounds a bit more like a specific thing that you're annoyed with, though. Like I'm not getting what the abstract question still is. Like,
he just brought up the point about freezing lanes, and it's a good point because I don't think teams do it because for the reasons I mentioned.
Right. So we're making this specifically just about freezing lanes, though. We've moved on from the last discussion, yeah.
Excuse me.
We've moved on from the whole discussion about game theory, but now we're talking specifically about whether, as an abstract concept, lane freezing is correct.
I mean, you could see it as game theory too, because even if it's the perfect play, the other play might open up the opponent for doing more mistakes because they don't respond well to the unfrozen lane.
Conjecture.
And that's something that one has to say.
Is this from, just to check, is this from a pro game or a solo queue?
It's pro games, of course.
Right. Okay. So LS, we're now what we got lost on here is we thought it was still the first question. He's now specifically discussing about lane freezes. So do you have something about that?
No. I mean, I want to ask him his own question. If I assert that a jungler should just go mid lane and get a kill level 3, why can't they do it?
Because it depends on a lot of variables.
Weird. Like, so when I'm telling you that the freezes depend on a lot of variables, you don't seem to care about that. But when I say that someone should just go mid and...
But you're first, you said nobody ever answers to you why this isn't good. And I said the pro teams answer to it and they don't do it. And that's the answer. It's not good.
That's not true. I have pros come on my stream all the time.
But why did no pro team ever do it then?
Why did no pro teams why did pro teams in season 1, 2, and 3 not lane swap?
So once again, you think you're ahead of the curve.
No. Listen, mate. Listen, I did.
Why was Flame's lane manipulation so profound and new? Why was it so profound and new in season 3? Why did no other pro think about it before?
Wait there a second. Right, look at this. Do you acknowledge his point, his counter to yours, where he says that just like basically, by your logic, you could never go back to an old VOD and say they were wrong at the time, right?
Oh no, you can.
No. Listen. So, for example, there was times in League of Legends before people even froze the lane, right?
Yeah, sure.
So if we went back and me and you, LS is out the call, me and you open a VOD now and we're watching, I don't know, season 1.5 and there's no lane freeze, right? If I then say to you, they could freeze the wave here and maybe get an advantage, you can't then say, but none of the other teams do it. Therefore, they're telling you that can't exist. Do you see the point that LS tried to counter with?
Yeah, but yeah, sure. I agree with that. But that would mean that he is the authority and he knows. But it's kind of unlikely.
I know what you mean. And in this scenario I gave there, what makes that not identical to LS's is that me and you do know that lane freezes are a thing. And obviously we actually know that as a fact and we're going back in time. So basically, I mean, you switched straight to the similar argument. You said to LS, also you're in advance, right? You know, in the future, you're ahead of the curve, right? So basically, is part of the problem that you have in this sense that LS talks as though he knows more about League than current pros? Is that the problem?
Yes. He thinks he's much better than he actually is. That's my opinion.
Okay. Do you have a response to that, LS?
I don't think he's bad at all. Like, I think he's a good analyst, but he's not nearly as good as he thinks.
Yeah, okay, right. Give a response to that, LS, and then I think we've got a decent segment out of this one. What do you think, LS?
I don't know. I actually don't know a way in which to respond. I genuinely don't know. He acknowledges that all the variables are important, and yet says that they don't matter, or that I can't explain them, even though my whole shtick for so many years was going too in depth and too in detail. I mean,
like I said before, if you notice, I initially just tried to take the callers at the initial face value. You know, I listen to the question, we try to answer the question. But if you notice, a lot of what it's going to come down to, I'm just going to predict right now, because it's already happened with the first two calls, is people don't just come out at the beginning and say, like, I don't like the way LS always talks. They always come from like an abstract position, and you have to get them to that point where they just admit, like, yeah, I think he's just full of shit, or he's pretending to be better than he is. And so in this particular case, LS, basically, it's just that the way you address things makes people think that you think you're the ultimate authority. Now, obviously, that's, you know, a lot of that's subjective. It's tone, how people take what you say. What do you actually think of that generally? Or do you notice that? Do you notice people think that you think you know everything?
I notice that I don't tend to have these arguments nearly as much with pro players. I notice that. I noticed that the more emotionally invested people are either in teams or the concept that pro players could be playing poorly relative to what could exist, they tend to take offense if something's pointed out as correcting it, or listing something that's more optimal.
I mean, you always return to pro players, but you never mention which pro players. Your team, like, of course, they don't.
The owner,
position of authority over them.
You seem to be very. You seem to be lacking a lot of knowledge about my stream, my videos overall, and then what things I actually talk about. Because you bring
like, you just returned again to the position of authority. You said, I talk about pro players
on my stream during MSI, during NA finals, during EU finals. I don't know what... You can go to my YouTube channel.
Which players? Name them.
He means like friends of his, like, you know.
Yeah, but friends are always, you put friends in a position where they have to disagree with you on stream, which hurts your reputation. That's always a bad thing.
Wait a second, just to check. LS, when you say you ask friends, I actually assumed you meant off stream. Is this on stream you mean you ask them?
I asked them on stream, off stream. It doesn't really matter.
Okay, because I think, by the way, he was implying there, look at this, that, you know, sometimes it's a conversation he had privately. And so his implication would be that's why he doesn't think they're lying, because it's just, you know, we were just having a private chat arguing about the jungle or something, and then some guy agreed or disagreed.
I mean, I could also say I talk to a lot of other challenger players I play with, and they disagree with his analysis.
Yeah, you could say that.
It's not a point. It's not a point.
Yes, those are appeals to authority, right?
Yeah, that's not a point. And I would have to bring them on stream. Would have to discuss, and it's bad argumentation.
I agree. It's not the best argumentation, sure. Whatever. Anyway, I think we got through something with this, mate. Thank you. So, danke for your time, mate.
Thanks.
Yeah, cheers. I think just, listen, that guy sort of ramped it up a little bit, but even he didn't go that ham. I think we get on the guy who just said that your style of coaching is degrading. Are you up for it?
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't know why. Because even though it does set a bad precedent, I did tell people not to do comments like that. It's like I said, I want the first guy from Shawshank, so let's just get that guy on. Like, with that sake,
sure.
I'll just message this guy. I think it's going pretty well so far.
Yeah, it's not bad. I don't know how to properly respond to some of this stuff, because
that's all right.
It felt like anything I could say doesn't matter to that person.
To some degree, I know what you mean, because like that's why, if you notice, I tried initially to give them as many chances as they can for their real point to be what we discuss. But when I realized that like almost no answer matters, that's when I try to play detective and figure out what would make someone still be annoyed if they got this answer, because like his case there, I don't think he understood the joke I said about Yellow Pete. Did you get the premise of what I was meaning? Like Yellow Pete basically interpreted
Yeah.
Like he was doing the same thing whenever you answered there. Like, I don't think he seems to, like, I have the same problem. I'll tell everyone right now. What happens is people assume from the way I give my opinion that I think I know it all. I don't in any way. In fact, on most shows, I would absolutely admit, I'm sure everyone on the show has overall more league knowledge than me. The point is, I do think what I think, and I think what I think for, in my opinion, very good reasons. Therefore, when I express it, I'm not going to be filled with doubt. I'm not going to say, well, of course, it could be differently. That's taken for granted. Like when we're at this level of discussion, especially when we're talking about abstracts, it's already taken for granted by everyone in the conversation that we don't all like think we're like the font of all knowledge and everything we say is perfect. So I think that's just unfortunately where people get a bit triggered by personality and they assume that themselves. So, right.
Okay.
So, like, first of all, what name do you want us to call you?
Just Jacob.
Okay, Jacob. Okay. So, okay, Jacob, what is when you did it in chat, you did it a little bit aggressively. You said your style of in-game coaching at times is degrading and ultimately can be harmful to the players. Now, as I said, that's not really a question. That's like sort of an assertion. So can you formulate a question out of that? What would you like to know from LS? Like, why does he think he can do that? Or why does he have that tone? What's the burning question here?
I guess it's just along the lines of like, I understand why he's aggressive with the points that he's making whenever a player, is playing the game. But why he thinks that it's better to be aggressive and assertive while the person is playing. Because if you are, then you're going to affect their mental and their focus.
Okay.
And they're more likely going to be, underperforming.
Okay, but as you said in the question, though, like, it's not just aggressive, right? You think he actually sort of like tears people down a bit, right? Or is that just the knock-on effect? What is the premise?
Probably. It depends on the mental stability of the player.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so LS, what do you think of this then? Another tip, another classic question people have of you criticism. So what do you think?
I think that I don't care how they perform inside of the game due to stress, because win or lose, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that knowledge is either conveyed or there's something beneficial that comes out of the coaching session for them. Also, I know that I do not offer coaching that often. I am assuming that I'm having an isolated session with the person, and I should attempt to make the most of the isolated session or have the largest impact on the person based on what I think would be most beneficial for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. But, okay, so what about the approach of instead just suggesting these things instead of saying, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, kind of like hampering, right? In game. And then you can turn on that switch to be a little bit more aggressive after the game where they're not trying to focus on what they're doing, because they're going to make more mistakes when they're under this kind of pressure.
Wait a second. One second. I'm just confused a second, right? When you say that, Jacob, do you mean like when he's watching like the person actually play the game live?
Yeah.
Not when he watches the VOD later, right?
No.
Okay, so this is when they're actually like he's watching screen sharing or whatever, and they're playing the game, and he's saying like, "You do this differently," or something like in that scenario, right? So LS, does your tone, for example, does it actually make some people play worse? Do they get more under pressure that you've scrutinized them on something small? Now they're going to make another small mistake. What do you think on this?
Yeah, it's probably true. I would imagine that most people, they get coaching because I only offer it on stream nowadays. I assume that they can either be nervous or they can be under pressure. They might be trying to play faster to keep up with what I'm saying, and thus it might actually affect their overall gameplay inside of the game. I have no doubt about that. I don't deny that.
So, but ultimately, it sounds like you're just trying to force them to, pressure themselves more in a way to do better, right?
Well, I want them to come out of the session knowing that they were unable to. I want them to feel how much is going on so that they can feel overwhelmed. Ideally, because the takeaway from that potentially is that they leave the session and they're like, wow, I couldn't keep up with any of that. But it lets them know that there's something there to strive towards, and they felt what it's like not being able to either compute it or execute it in real time. Whereas if I tell them in a VOD review or a replay off stream, they might be able to say to themselves, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do that next time, etc. But they still don't, A, know what it feels like, and B, they don't personally know how they themselves feel when trying to chase after it. which I think are valuable things in themselves.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
I have a thought on this, so because I've heard Ellis discuss this many times. I've seen him do his coaching before, and I know what you mean. Like if you watch it the first time, you'd be like, "Holy shit, the guy hasn't even got into the lane yet." And you said he's supposed to click 15 times back and forwards, and like you're supposed to put that ward 1 second earlier for the optimal timing of the job. Like he does overload them a lot, and I would agree. He definitely goes ham. I would say it like this: first of all, don't think of LS like he's the person who's at the checkout at Safeway's, a supermarket, right? Because that person is obliged to be polite to you because they deal with tons of people. They don't know who those people are, and their job is just be polite, a uniform manner to everyone, right? And, you'd expect them to be polite to you. LS, first of all, as far as I know, when he does coaching, has like a limited number of slots. He has 10 slots on this week, So he actually, to some degree, can choose who his customers are. So if he doesn't want someone who seems like they're a waste of time, he can get that person out of the thing and go, it's not worth it for you. It's not worth it for me. I want someone who's dedicated to learning or whatever it might be, right? So first of all, he can definitely set a certain standard himself. And then I would describe it like this. To me, he's like the guy that you get to be your coach in the same way as, say I weighed 225 pounds and I wanted a fitness guy, and I tell this fitness guy, listen, your fucking prices are really expensive. So if I hire you better get results. And then he's like, oh, I'll get results no matter what. And obviously, if I tell the guy that, he's going to come on Monday morning like, get out of bed, you miserable worm. Give me 20 on the ground now. That ain't good enough. What? You think that's fucking good enough? You think you can make it to the top level of professional athletes? Is that you'll never be anything. Like he's that sort. He's like the drill sergeant guy. So first of all, there's an element of that where he's trying to provoke you to know massive change has to happen. And as he says, another point I think people often miss is one of the reasons why on the VODs he makes 1 million comments is that's actually value for money. You can go watch that VOD 20 times and pick something different out. So I don't know if anyone knows this because I've read quite a lot of books about the concept of coaching. If you actually had an athlete and you were going to coach them for 3 years, you wouldn't do what LS is doing right now. You'd be right. What you'd do is you'd pick one small thing in the game and you'd say, see this small thing you made there, like a rotation or a bad trade. Just work on this next time. You'd give them one small thing, but that's because you're going to work with that guy every day for 3 years. So the idea is we'll fix that, then we'll get to the next thing, then we'll get to another thing, and we'll build into it. If he's only going to have one coaching session with a guy, and that guy wants to not go, what, that wasn't worth X amount of dollars, in a way, giving him the value for money, I get the logic behind that. There is something to that. You could get a lot out of that VOD if you keep watching it. I agree. You definitely can't apply all that stuff at once. It'd probably kill your game completely if you tried to do everything he says. So I think that's part of it. I mean, I realize I'm speaking for him on that one, but I've tried to sort of articulate what I think the concept is on some of that. And then I would also just say, I have known a lot of people in life, in my field, in journalism and content creation, in pro players who, if you ever talk to them behind the scenes, all everyone has for you all day long is excuses, mate. The reason they lost that game was this one thing at the end of the game. Or the reason why they dived me, and what you normally find is it isn't. What they did is that was the most obvious mistake they made, but they made 20 mistakes that even put them in that position. So what I would say on that one again is that to a fan, they might be just leave him. He was learning fine. It's why is he hiring LS as a coach if he's just learning fine? Doesn't he want to learn the best possible? Doesn't he want to then go into the mid-game best possible? Doesn't he want to fight for this dragon? That's the problem is what does the person want? So I think part of the problem with this is the entertainment value of watching someone learn on stream. You kind of feel like you're in the position of the person being coached. So if he's being harsh, you're like, oh, come on, man, what the fuck? He's trying to learn from you. But I don't know. I know what you mean. It's one of those ones where I don't feel like there's ever going to be agreement between all the fans how he does it in that sense. Do you have any? Has it made you think of any other angle to it though, Jacob? Is there anything else you want to know?
I mean, it makes a lot of sense, especially whenever you bring up the money, the value for your whatever you're paying for. But it makes me wonder, do you kind of change your coaching style if it's with your team or longer, more sessions with the person, or do you still continue to be kind of I don't know what the right word is, just the way you are, I guess.
Well, there's my YouTube is literally documentation that I always adapt to the person that I'm coaching based on all of my experiences with handling certain personalities or people. And I do what I believe to be best, in my opinion, having kept refining and honing my craft or whatever for coaching people over the years. You can go onto my YouTube channel and see the most recent Annie session where everyone said that I was so nice and kind or whatever, yada, 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 which is obviously an opposite take to what people perceive my coaching as.
People think, LS, that you're just Gordon Ramsay and that you just say every real shit as an idiot. Like, so, I know what they mean. Like, the most ridiculous ones are like that. Those are often ones where there's like a backstory as well, right?
So, right. There's always going to be backstories. Another recent example that would be pretty good is there was a coaching session from the other day. Well, actually, there were several where I was going off on the person, but I went way over time. I think I went over an hour and a half on time because I was really trying to drive home the points.
All right.
And it... Well,
you made that sound like it's a bonus that you're just fucking roasting them completely. Like,
no.
Give me 20 minutes to tell you what a piece of shit you are.
No. It was because I'm having... things weren't working, and I was trying to adjust and adapt as it was going because it was a very difficult session to handle, and I was actually getting very stressed out for different factors inside of the session. But I don't think any of my sessions are the same. I think that the ones that tend to surface like on Reddit and whatnot are highlights or they're examples of the Gordon Ramsay-esque coaching. Even if that maybe is the majority, it's definitely not all of them. And I think it's disingenuous to say that I don't adapt to the client.
Oh, and I don't mean to assert that at all.
Oh,
I've seen a lot of your coaching videos and sessions, and I think overall they're incredibly beneficial.
What about this then, Jacob? So since you started, as I said, it was obviously in Twitch chat, it was, we don't know the tone, we don't know how he'd say it. It sounded a bit spicy. Just as a general thought, like, by the way, I genuinely just want to know your opinion here. Do you actually think overall he probably is is his coaching having negative effects on some of the people he coaches? Do you think some of them do get too pressured or, they make, they play even worse and so they look even stupider and then he coaches them even more like that? Is that your actual take?
Temporarily, maybe. Like temporarily they might be affected, depending on how sensitive they are. Cause different people react different ways. Some people might actually be thrown off the game if they weren't expecting it. If they just thought, all right, this is a coach. All right, I'm going to learn a little bit more. But, as Ella said, what's that word that he used? He specifies the way that he coaches depending on the personality.
Right.
And yeah. It makes a lot of sense, and I think...
we don't have to agree. You can listen, mate, you can still disagree if you want and think whatever the fuck you want. Don't worry about that.
I think it is good, I guess. Yeah, I guess I haven't seen too many of the more sentimental, is that the right word?
Just sympathetic, maybe.
Yeah, side of LS. I don't know if that's because... like branding or persona, because I think that's definitely a part of the reason why people...
I will say this, by the way. Here's another thing that probably should be addressed on this topic is, let's just be absolutely clear here, right? In the same way as I couldn't put on a suit and tie and be the most fucking, buttoned up PC person in the world, even if I tried, I wouldn't be the best at doing that, right? I do think LS definitely understands his brand. And the key thing is, it's not that our brands are fake, it's that we exaggerate. So, for example, don't worry, as a person, LS is pretty bitchy, quite sarcastic and condescending, all the best qualities in people. And so he puts that into his coaching persona as well, because it makes sense. He's going with the flow, in that sense. So I would also say on that one, that's why a lot of the questions, basically, I always end up asking the person, do you just not like LS as a person? Because if they don't, that's totally legit. Can totally get that completely. It's just that in that scenario, I am a bit puzzled how many of the people who don't like him as a person, want to watch and then critique things that aren't about him as a person. It's they want to, that they keep sidetracking their resentment to some other angle of it. So anyway, I think we get your point. I think it's quite a common thing that people ask. So thanks for coming on, mate.
Thanks for having me.
That's no problem. Not the classic one, I think. Why not?
Yeah.
It's you know what? We'll add some of these little in-between call bits, because I'll get another person in a sec. The reason why I made that point there as well is it's a bit like the thing that happens with Monty as well, where people are thing with Monte Cristo, though, is he's so condescending and arrogant. And I'm yeah, I'm aware of who he is as a person. Have we got to actually any points yet? I don't know if you're aware of this, but he knows that and likes that. Like, I've often said this point to people. It's like, it's not actually illegal to be an arsehole. Are you aware of that? No one was making a whole career off it. It's like, until that becomes illegal, we won't worry too much about that. So,
one of the interesting things, though, is the people that say that when they're watching the coaching session, that they don't think that the person, that it's beneficial for the person. They're assuming how the person feels.
Sure.
Which is completely just weird. I mean, personally, I respond the best to similar coaching. I mean, I that was the way I was coached in StarCraft 1. I want...
See, the chain of abuse, guys. Once it starts with one person, they then think that's the normal way to behave. And
there
then
we go.
Next thing you know, someone's on a stripper pole somewhere.
Oh,
because daddy didn't get enough attention. That would be a dark world, wouldn't it? Like suddenly one of the people you've streamed is like a fucking Minecraft streamer. Like, yeah, see me now, LS. You see me in lane now, son. Oh, it's night time. I've got to go hide now. I don't even know what that game is. I pretended to know the premise of the game there. So, what about this? Do you like this one? This guy says, let's talk about what it is specifically that makes people want to get better, in air quotes, but not actually put it to practice.
We can do that one. If you want.
Would be interested, I think. It's
Okay.
not a bad one. Not all of them have to be people telling you a cunt in more polite manner.
Those are my favorite.
So, I know they are the best. Sadly, I have to say, we haven't really had anyone who came on with the stones to really pull that off properly. Right, I will say at the outset, just because I think it showed me this. This guy actually is a subscriber of yours, LS. So I'll just say at the beginning, be biased.
Been around for a while.
Be nicer to him than normal people,
Okay.
Or just if you want to fuck your own career, just be horrible to him, and then maybe
I'll give him my money anyways.
no
He knows
choice.
how
No
it is.
choice. Anyway, so Tyler here was the one who asked the question, which was, well, it wasn't a question. He basically said, like, let's discuss, why, kind of what I alluded to, like, why do people have so many excuses, sort of like they have a million reasons. Everyone says, I want to improve. That's why guides are so popular. People want to watch coaching streams. But I kind of agree with his premise that, like, a lot of people say they want to get better, but if you actually even tell them what to get better at, they'll find a million excuses why they won't, and they never actually do implement anything they say they could. That's why here's the thing, okay, when a really sick pro play gets posted to Reddit and all the fans do that thing where they're like, this is actually a bad play because I would have like dodged the shuriken, flashed over the R, and then I would have like come back. Like, when they do that, then not always wrong. They might actually vaguely know what they're talking about. The point is they don't ever put that level of focus into their play. So what's the premise here, Tyler? Give us like what you were thinking of when you thought of this topic.
Yeah, I mean, so I've watched Nick for last 5 years, easily, and countless times we see people get on the stream. They'll pay loads of money to get coached for hours at a time, which is great. You get quality information, but then next day, next month, they'll take everything Nick has said and just kind of either it'll start off good, maybe win a couple games, they'll have that placebo effect, and then it'll die down. They'll be like, I didn't really learn anything, maybe because they lost a game or two after their nice little win streak of being confidence boosted. But, then they just go back to their old ways, saying maybe even Nick didn't help them or wasn't even worth their money, their time. But for whatever reason, people will come back, they'll pay, they'll get the same information. OPGG reviews are like one of the biggest ones I can think of that are copy pasted, same content over and over. Just, hey guys, play Annie. But we see those guys who don't play Annie, don't play Garen, don't spam constantly the same champions. And it's just like, how are you paying $60 to get coach or even $10 to get your OPGG reviewed, but you're not going to even take that time to take the information in? So why are people just giving this money over? To me, it doesn't make sense. Like, why do you think they're doing it? Is it more just for them to get on the camera, or is it just they think they want to get better? Okay. Or
sure, yeah. What would you speculate it is, LS, from your experience? I mean, you've dealt with a lot of the people like that, I would assume.
Well, people like the idea of the end result more than they like the effort that comes in with it. I mean, I can use myself as an example. A couple of years ago, I thought that I'm a lazy bastard who would just take comfortable ways out. So I bought a personal trainer. I bought multiple sessions, first time going to a gym, because I had never gone to the gym since I was a teenager, and so I just thought, okay, let me get a personal trainer. I went there, and nothing the guy said was inaccurate or wrong or bad by any means. But I mean, I was just fucking lazy, so I don't go back. I don't do
Sure.
anything. So, but you like what you're saying with people.
By the way, LS, I thought this was just for me, but your mic volume sometimes like drops way low, so it did just now, and sometimes it comes back up again. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that either.
Oh, fair enough.
I'll try to look into it. But the thing that he's mentioning about like why do people send me their OPGGs when they haven't even listened to basic information? Well, like me, or not like me, but why do people go to a personal trainer when they're morbidly obese? Rather than cut calories, right? Basic dieting skills. You don't
Sure.
need,
Yes.
a personal trainer for that. So if, but the personal trainer won't deny the person who's morbidly obese if they come to them. The same way that I will happily tell you to play Annie for $10. It is quite strenuous. It does take about 30 seconds. But it's all right. It's all right.
So, so it could be like a discipline thing.
Well, one of the things
not wanting it enough.
One of the things he said there that I think was a pretty good point was like that you like the idea of getting better. So I actually like in most cases, by the way, I find this a useful thought experiment when someone disagrees with you. Is initially act as though what they're saying is genuine. Don't think that they're a bad faith actor and they're lying and you're tricking you. No, try and think that they're being genuine about what they're expressing. So I'm sure when these people initially pay and book the session, they probably are really jazzed up. They probably think, I've had all these problems trying to read guides myself and try and improve myself. It's never worked. But if I get this guy, he's going to tell me the secret. He's going to tell me what I need to get to the next level. And the problem is 99% of secrets at improving in anything in life is very, very tiny technique tweaks, which then need a lot of repetition and a lot of focus to make work. And so the problem is that's not very sexy, actually. It's not like he's really going to tell you, like, press Control F and shift twice and you automatically get into diamond. It's going to be like, no, do this little thing when you lane, save your summoner an extra second. No, basic things that actually are very boring to implement. But if you implement it, you would get way better. So the analogy I would give is this. Think about how many diets and self-help books are super popular. I mean, famously, there's people who've bought books that they've never read. They read like chapter 1 or they saw the commercial, it looked great. And when they send off for it, I believe them. I think when they get that book, they're going to do the exercise, an exercise. Like, for example, what he said there, the reason you go to the gym and get a trainer, well, I don't know if you're aware of this. You can do you can get totally jacked without weights at all. You can do all sorts of body weight exercise. But the point is, who's going to make you do it? You want to pay some guy to make you do it, right? Because you're too lazy. So I kind of get the premise he's going for there.
Yeah, I agree. That makes sense. Yeah, it's always like I like the idea of going out to the gym, getting a nice 6-pack. But I mean, at the end of the day, am I really going to go out there and do the crunches, do the workouts? Probably not. But it'd be great if I could motivate myself to get there. So I guess at the end of the day, a lot of people have that lack of motivation to really put the effort into it. But I mean, is it possible that, for example, this might be kind of off topic, but like no matter what, would you say any player who wants to go from bronze, could they get to diamond if they really wanted to put the effort in? Or do you think there are some people who are just, no matter how much effort, they wouldn't be able to do it?
Well, the thing is, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there are every now and then, I'd say every 6 months, there'll be a thread. It happens in CS as well. In CS and League of Legends, I always see these threads that are like, disabled gamer with no arms and no legs makes it to plat. And you're like, holy, and by the way, I've never been plat in League of Legends. Even I see that like, fucking hell, what am I doing wrong? Like, I must be actually really, really bad. It's like, so in theory, I think to some degree, you must at least be able to get like, I would say, surely you must at least be able to get like maybe gold or above, if no matter what. What do you think, LS? What's like, if you took any random person, assuming they're not literally incapable of pressing keys, what do you think, like, the basic realistic expectation would be if they applied themselves with coaching and stuff? How high could they get, do you think?
Mid-diamond. I think it's reasonable for anyone with no MOBA experience to come into League of Legends. All right, so I'll answer this in two ways. I think I think it's reasonable that a person with critical thinking skills, pretty good self-reflection, etc., can actually come into League and hit mid-diamond within 6 months. I think that probably anyone without some sort of thing ailing them is probably capable of low mid diamond after enough time put in. Yeah. But this sort of does bring up something that I talked about with Beyond the Rift a very, very long time ago. In my own subjective experiences, people who were bronze, iron, etc. for extremely long periods of time, despite constant efforts to climb, playing hundreds of games a season, etc., I never once personally encountered one that didn't have something ailing them in some way, shape, or form.
Like what? What type of a thing might it be?
Anything. Literally. Oh God, I don't even see. This is I
like
said this
even
on
like mental stress.
Yeah, it can be mental stress. It can be tilt. It can actually just be like a learning disability or something. When you see that, I and again, it's all subjective experiences. I said this on Beyond the Rift before, and it sounds so bad to say it. But I've coached dozens at least of players in that subset MMR whatnot, and every single time I saw the OPGG, multiple years bronze, multiple years low silver, etc., I got into the call with them. There was always something going on. There was always something. And it seemed really sad that it, again, subjective, it seemed like a trend. And I guess that maybe for those people, mid-diamond or something is probably unrealistic because there's other stuff going on.
Oh, I'll give you an example. So as I said, I've never been anywhere close, not even vaguely close to high ranked in League of Legends. I actually think it's a game that, to be fair, I never came from a MOBA background, so my brain probably still isn't very much adapted to how the game plays. I come from Counter-Strike and Quake and maybe a bit of RTS, so not very similar. And the problem I have to say I've always had when I play the game is that I don't actually put any kind of purpose to how I play. I don't really try to improve. So as a result, I do just run in circles like a hamster on a wheel. Like what I do is I go in the game, I pick whatever I feel like. So even stuff that you shouldn't even pick if you're terrible, like Thresh or something, and yeah, I probably fuck up all the lanterns and all this. But then again, I can't blame anyone. Like I don't say to people, I should be way better than this guy. I'm putting any effort. Like I've never, like if I read a guide, you know when you're like on the loading screen that takes forever in League, you pull up a guide. It's like, you don't have time to read the guide properly. You probably, if you ever wanted to get better in League, I'll tell you, even as a scrub, how I would do it. If I wanted to get better tomorrow, I would take an hour and I'd say, right, within this hour, I can probably fit one solo queue game. So for the first 15 minutes of the hour, I'm going to figure out one thing to try and work on in the game. I'm going to read a basic guide, try and remember a couple of details, and then I'm going to play just thinking about those things. Now, I don't do that. Even in the game, I don't do stuff properly. Like, I'm flashing in to do stupid-ass moves, like, I'm trying to be like Mad Life every time. I never apologize to my lane partner when I fuck the whole game up as well. Just let them carry that emotional burden, So, I totally get why people don't improve. I agree with you. Mm-hmm. It is weird that the same person who doesn't improve then pretends like they think they want to. Because if they could just accept what I accept, which is I'm just garbage, I'm just playing for fun, that's one thing. But they all secretly, it's because people value their rank, don't they? They don't want to believe they're really like bronze. Like, how could they be bronze? They think that means something about them. They don't realize how many people are bronze. Most people are in bronze and silver. Wouldn't it like 90% is in bronze and silver or something mental? It's quite a lot.
I mean, most people, if they really tried, we could have most player base in like gold. I mean, I think to me, gold is a very not too trash, not too great. It's very medium players.
I would say this, like Ellis can have his take, but it's like the angle of like so that German guy before who was trying to be like hyper literal, right? By his way of thinking about the world, everyone should be in perfect shape because everyone should be like, you see, you are going to 2,100 calories today. If you do 1,900 calories today, then you have deficit, and in time you will lose. It's like, yeah, you're absolutely right, but no one thinks that way when they're looking, burger or salad. No one can think that information, can they? So he's right. If we were all robots, I think we could all nail it. We could all be pretty decent at the game, and the worst player would be like, but really, like human tendency is what's wrecking it. So. Ellis, what do you think? Could actually most people realistically be in gold at least?
Yeah, if they apply themselves. Most people don't bother to apply themselves. And the interesting thing about this is that even not applying themselves, if they don't apply themselves but they still don't get gold, I feel like their passive ability to gain or refine things over an extended period of time is just clearly lacking. Right? Like you can't go and chop trees for 6 months and not figure out by the 6 month ways to do it more optimally than when you first began, even if you're not really thinking about it while you do it. Maybe it's something you do for 10 minutes a day.
By the way, there's even a good analogy. So you know that famous Zen analogy, actually, where they said, if I have, I mean, that's actually, I think it's an Abraham Lincoln quote someone claims, but there's a similar one in Zen where it basically goes like, if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I spend the first 4 hours sharpening the blade of the axe. Because the idea is then the 2 hours that you chop, you'll be super effective. I think that's the analogy right there for people learning the game. It's like, if you only will play the game and try and improve, you'll never properly improve. You have to be able to put in the time that's not fun to then make your play more effective.
Yeah. Where did he go?
I don't know why he's just disappeared, but whatever. Maybe he's just got really motivated. He's out there doing fucking pull-ups. He's like eating a macrobiotic diet. He's pressing the universal vibrations of love from his heart chakra into the global galactic center, calling forth our ancestors to come and release us from this matrix because the League of Legends part of the show has ended. Oh, he's back, right? So there he is. So, do you have any final part to this segment? Do you have any final comment or question?
I mean, I could honestly go on with questions, but I really appreciate your guys' time.
It's all right. No problem. Cheers, mate.
All right.
Yeah, cheers. Have a good night. Or night, LS. I don't know where you live, Lauren.
Don't you worry about where I live. He's like, yeah, and enjoy that yogurt next to your PC later, Thorin. Hope you put the honey that's next to it in there. And maybe close your windows, you little bitch. It's like... Anyway, we'll get another person in. See, that was not a bad one because that was like a comedic relief. We got to all relax a little bit. So now here's the thing, guys. We need a new topic. And I got to tell... Actually, I'll see if there's any good one in here first. I'll just double check if there's a good one here. Do you want to talk about something?
No. We got to get one of the...
There's got to be a spicy one in
there. Yeah, there's got to be a spicy one.
Like, I have to say, part of me worried it was only going to be spice. There's people coming straight in your motherfucking grill 24/7. But actually, everyone's just been... This is why... you know what? This actual show is a fucking metaphor for the esports industry. Because on Twitter, everyone's talking that good shit. They're all buku mad shit in your face. Like... Also, and then if you meet them in real life, even at esports events, they're the loveliest people ever. I've had people, LS, who were guys who mega flamed me for years on Twitter, who they were coming up to me in real life, like shaking my hand. Oh, hello, it's really nice to meet you. Are you for fucking real? Like, who even are these people? So let's get a spicy one, shall we? Let's see if I've got a good one here. I'll see if there's like a one that's actually a little bit spicier. Let's have a look. What was so obviously this is one where you didn't submit an actual question. You wanted to talk about the whole famous Jin Air would beat G2 angle, right?
I did kind of phrase it in a question in that.
Okay, tell me what it is then.
How LS, when he's... Because obviously you can look at a team and see the things they objectively do better and kind of rate that against another team. So obviously you can see two teams play that haven't matched up against each other and say, this team objectively seems to play the fundamentals better than the other. But sure. I'm just wondering how, when he sees that, how he rates teams and how he weights different areas of the game so that he can come up with opinions such as he thinks Jinner would be able to beat G2 and what he's seeing to kind of base that assumption. Okay, right. 1 second. We'll pause 1 second, right? LS, you know I don't ever watch fucking Twitch chat when I do shows. I don't pay attention. I just pay attention to the show. And I actually, one of the reasons why normally is because I don't want them to like infuriate me and say so much stupid stuff. But I almost did get broken there when he started talking. Someone said, scuffed Kelsey Bowes. That almost did break me. But anyway, I was listening to the question aside from that. So, LS, let's get into this then. It's obviously a topic everyone wants to talk about. This guy's in academy, so has some background to know about League. Let's get into this one then. What kinds of scenarios would make you think that that's a reasonable comment to make, that Jin Air Green Wings would beat G2? Now, I will say, I noticed the problem with this whole thing is because you've addressed it a couple of times, you definitely have dug the hole deeper. And so there's going to be 50 different possible positions. So can you state your position initially? What is the position? Is that if Jin Air played against G2, like in what context? If they played 10 games, 100 games, if they played once, what's the premise that we want to establish initially?
I said, I believe in April, that I thought that Jin Air could take games off of G2, but they would have a losing amount over 100, but it would be a reasonable amount. I can't actually remember what I said on Listen Loco. Was it 60? Was it 60-40, or did I say like 65-35? And then I said that KT would be able to beat them more than they would lose.
And then the side issue, but again, this is sort of a separate topic, but we can talk about this as well, was like he thought if G2 went and played in LCK, then they would, this is the crucial wording, be in relegations. He didn't say they would be relegated, like, they would lose to some challenges. They would just be in the bottom three, is it, I think?
Bottom four.
And then bottom four, therefore they'd have to play a relegations match, similar to when, people were in the promotion slot in LCS, but you can get back into LCS, obviously. So, right, let's start it out then. So, where would you want to start on this one then, Prosper? What's so off about the comment? Like, what's confusing you initially when you hear that?
So I guess it doesn't really confuse me, but I guess I'm playing devil's advocate for it here. But I'm just wondering, what areas of the game are you saying they're objectively better at a fundamental level?
Oh, wait a second. I just check Prosper. You actually do disagree with LS on this, right? You think that G2 would thrash generic green rings, right?
I mean, I haven't actually I don't watch enough LCK, at least not of Jinna. When I watch VODs, I'm just picking usually the top teams. So okay. I actually haven't watched enough games to say. But obviously, with how G2 has just performed at MSI and winning,
sure,
I see how people disagree with it. So.
I like how reserved he is though, because he knows that it's a fucking Korean pro team. He knows it might not be that outlandish. Doesn't matter that it's fucking.
I dismiss it out of hand. I'll put that.
I just don't like giving opinions when because I haven't watched them play any games, so I can't say.
Right. But you're not willing to dissent as easily as a fucking Redditard or something, who just thinks that clearly this can't be the case. G2's top of Europe and KT Jin are bottom of LCK. You're not willing to dissent as easily.
I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to talk out my ass. They're a team. They're obviously a good. They're obviously in LCK, they're going to have some way to play the game. So I'm not going to just chat shit when I haven't seen how they play.
Okay. So it's more about your thought process on this then, LS. He's not specifically disagreeing. Someone else can come on if they disagree as well. But again, we're going to have to figure out a system to get them on the show. So come on, LS.
I just wanted more when LS is saying these things, what are you fundamentally looking at to kind of start this opinion? Okay.
So I'll tell you one thing, LS, that would be a good question to ask initially. Because obviously the whole problem with this entire topic isn't that you didn't give your thoughts. If you'd given your thoughts super in depth, people would say they were stupid and they didn't agree, but they would, it would be the end of the issue. The problem is, famously, you said that you thought people wouldn't even be able to understand the premise, right? That, it's too high level a concept. And so the idea is it would be the equivalent of saying to someone sure, you could translate the words in German, but if you don't speak German, you're gonna have to learn German first to know what I meant by it. That's kind of a premise. So give us what would you explain if someone had the basis? What are we looking at here that would allow Jin Air to be better than G2, even in 51% of games?
Well, the thing I said with Kelsey and Veteran, right, on Elitist United, I believe is the title of the show, yes. And Prosper here is probably going to know what I'm talking about, is that like what he said with they are a Korean pro team. They are Korean challenger players. And that comes with a lot of implied knowledge of what it is to be a Korean challenger player. I don't think it's that preposterous based on watching their games throughout LCK Spring, the spots that they put some of the top teams in, and how the top teams had to fight out of it. As well as watching G2 in spring, because again, remember, these comments are coming in April. This is well before MSI and all their MSI games and yada, yada, yada. I
believe this was even before the end of LEC and LCS.
Right, it was before the end.
It was I think the beginning of the playoffs, maybe.
So that's where it came in. And if I were to say that, well, mechanically, Jin Air's players are really good, that comes with a lot of implied knowledge of, well, what does mechanically really good mean? I can say that to a pro player, and they can probably infer what I'm saying to, or what I'm referring to or alluding to relative to, well, what is the standard for what we're going to say is good? And the same way that Prosper here, he can probably lane against someone in solo queue or scrim and tell objectively where this person probably stands compared to the elite supports. Now you can tell with it.
I mean, ADCs is more noticeable, but yeah.
You can tell within the first minute just by how they move.
Yeah. If I get into a solo queue game on a Smurf, I can tell.
You can tell if you're up against a Smurf.
I can tell if this guy with a 70% win rate is going to get stuck in D2 or if he's going to be challenger. Like if he's moving what I would expect from someone in my scrims, like he's going to be like a challenger.
So
sure. It's just you just notice it.
And the way that you notice it is because you've watched so many patterns occur of what good play is and what proper movement is and what are spots that are likely to be advantageous, and you find these players constantly gravitating towards them, but then seeking to secure them. And that's not common for a poor player. And so when you're seeing it, or when you're playing against it inside of solo queue, you can tell right away, okay, I'm against a Smurf. Or I'm against someone that this isn't normal, this isn't their MMR. But to an average person that would be watching the game, they wouldn't know what to look for in the first place. What makes it so different compared to the rest of the MMR? Why is the spot that champion's standing in so good? What makes it so beneficial? And it comes with all of this, again, implied knowledge that you have to understand about both the champions, but also the lane state, the minion state, etc. So when you factor all of this in together, you're looking at player mechanics and you're looking at everything else that's going on. I think that you can reach conclusions that maybe it's not this ridiculous that this team might be able to beat this team. I mean, we wouldn't say that the number one team from any wildcard region, right? The number one team from a random wildcard region that's not an MSI or something like that, if you know what I'm referring to, they wouldn't necessarily be better than the 7th place team in EU or even 8th place.
Sure.
Because skill, sort of like knowledge, it's not linear. There's metrics. The best soccer players from, country Y might not even be better than the 4th league in country Z. So it doesn't matter that they're the best from something or that they're the worst. You have to look at what is actually on your screen. What are you actually seeing? And when I did that, I felt like, in the moment, that it wasn't that ridiculous to assert that these two teams could probably beat G2.
All right, what about this question? Why did you assert it then? Why not just make all of what you've just said as an abstract comment and then be like, so you know what? I think it's not impossible. If Jin Air played G2, they might be able to beat him. I've seen them have games like that. Why not make it like a bit? I mean, I know I sound like the first two fucking callers. Like, why not just be nicer, LS? Just be a good guy. It's like, why be so assertive with it? Like, did you do that? Like, did you want to ignite debate on this? Because obviously, everyone who's an EU fan is going to be like, what the fuck? Did you know that was going to happen?
No. The way that this whole thing fucking blew up is I wasn't even the first person to say that KT and Jin Air were better. We were co-streaming with webcam and Twitch chat, and I asked the BBQ players who they thought would win, and they all unanimously said KT and Jin Air. And then I started laughing, and I said, I think so too. No. Not after MSI.
Okay. Do you have any other angle on this process that you want to ask about?
Well, I just because obviously he said he's looking at things that he's objectively saying. What, just from a team kind of standpoint, what are the concepts, the things that you were looking at? Because from there it sounded like you were looking at the individual players and saying you think they're as good or better than G2's players. Whereas what I'm more wondering is, do you not look at how they work as a team and how they are pressuring with their champions in the moments where they can be doing things and how they are controlling vision and when and how they are taking fights? Does any of this come into a factor, or what are the topics you wait?
It comes into it. How and where they're taking fights. How are they losing team fights? What what type of macro decisions are they making, and yada yada yada. I mean, all of that sort of goes into it. I think that. If you watch Jin Air and KT's games and whatnot, their players aren't pushovers entirely. In fact, Jinair's bot lane, Root and Kellen, they're actually pretty good.
They're pretty decent,
they're actually really good by LCK standards. They're one of the best bot lanes in LCK. And when you acknowledge that in a limited sample size, there is a limited amount of things that can actually occur. Even if Faker is the best player in the world, in 10 games, not everything that he knows or is capable of will end up surfacing. Because it just simply can't happen in that limited time frame. And so even if there's more or less things that Team A or Team B are capable of, it doesn't necessarily mean that it would arise inside of a best of X. And so I think that it ends up being reduced to, well, what is likely to occur, what is likely to attempt to happen. And then you have to watch the series. You can't just watch 1, 2, 3 games of a team and then think, well, okay, I've seen these patterns from them, and I think this is how they always play 110% of the time. I think that would be disingenuous. In a similar light, I mean, most recently at MSI, I believe Veteran were very vocal that PvB was a lot better than what people were thinking. In fact, I predicted them to win a couple of times. I mean, they should have beat Team Liquid. If you looked at
how they actually played the game, they did some things pretty well, to a fairly high
they miss skill shots.
LECLs.
Right. They miss skill shots, because if they don't miss skill shots, Team Liquid was being outpaced. They were being out-macroed. They were being put into positions where they need PvB to miss what we would probably define as relatively simple skill shots for a pro player standard. So if that's the case, I mean, it's not that ludicrous to say, well, PvB's actually pretty good, and predict them to win over some of the teams. But to a person who can only hug stats and they can only hug results, they probably see, Team Liquid not dodging the skill shots, quotation marks, as outplaying PvB, and Team Liquid knew this was going to be the case all along, and they just baited PvB into fucking missing these skill shots. And no, that's not how the game works.
I guess if you can't see the game and understand that this skill shot's supposed to be unmissable or not dodgeable, then it would just look different to you. I guess actually that's a good kind of thing about why you need that level of understanding in the game.
Yes. To make these assertions, you absolutely do. And so it's also very frustrating to try to explain to someone, how do we explain that PvB was actually better than Team Liquid in all of their interactions almost?
I mean, PvB actually did 2-0 G2, by the way. I don't forget that.
They did that. They did that. And but how do we explain to a regular person who lacks the implied knowledge of what champions are capable of, but also what makes good plays?
I mean, I guess you can say, in this scenario, I think the thing is they just have to go on faith to trust you, because you're essentially saying in this scenario, blue team should win this play 100 times out of 100 if both teams play it perfectly. But obviously in the moment, Fongvu are a less experienced team. They are probably more nervous than Team Liquid, although maybe you could argue it had less pressure on them. I think you probably default to kind of the level of play you're used to playing against, and they're used to playing at a lower level. It's I'll give an example. For example, we started scrimming I think we are probably the academy team in EU that scrims our main team the most. And when me and Matty first started playing against Reckless and Hillsang, it wasn't pretty in bot lane. And it took a while to get to a point where we had adapted to actually, be able to lane against them without essentially just getting rolled over, because skill shots that I would normally fire, Reckless doesn't let you hit these skill shots unless he doesn't have a way to dodge them. He's not going to let you hit them. So firing out skill shots that normally hit players just wasn't cutting it. I think it's Fongvu kind of, their base level isn't the same as Team Liquid's. The level of players they're used to playing against is a bit lower.
Yeah. That could be. I mean, they could also be having off days, because they did beat G2. They're not bad players by any means. I mean, another frustration, because as we're talking about this, and how you're mentioning as well, that you have to be able to actually understand what's happening with these champions, and what is a really bad spot to be in, what is a simple skill shot that should have connected. It makes me think of the German caller from earlier, where I can try to say, well, this team should freeze, and he says, no, it just creates tempo.
What about this then? Prosper, let me ask you a question. So part of the real outrage on this topic is, like I said at the beginning, there's a whole bunch of different angles to this, like the whole thing of the relegation thing's a separate topic, whether Jin Air would beat G2 is one topic. But one of the things that annoyed people was that LS basically said, when he famously made these comments, like that he didn't want to, like he didn't think he could explain it anymore when he came on Listen Local. Like he felt like, you know, there's a point at which if the person doesn't have a base level of like experience and knowledge of the game, like, it's going to be too complicated basically to get them up to speed to then explain his point, right? Do you actually agree with that? Like a lot of people on Reddit went the other way. They were saying that, I mean, I won't give my own opinion, but they were saying that they think anything that you understand, you should be able to explain very simply. Like, do you think that that's true?
I think you can explain it, but there's like a level where they just have to believe what you're saying, because if you take any like pro player and you show them a freeze frame of a game and say a team fight's about to happen from this starting position, which team wins, probably most pros will say, if you look at how the champions are positioned and what skills are up, most would probably come to a conclusion like this team will win 99% of the time. Yeah. Whereas obviously to a viewer, they might just have a very different view of the game, and they either might have lacking the breadth of knowledge or the depth of knowledge to actually just implicitly kind of feel like, it's not like when a pro player looks at the game, they're thinking of all the factors and then making a logical decision. It's a lot of like pattern recognition, overseeing these things lots of times.
Yes.
So they just look at it and it's like just a gut feeling, like this team
intuition.
So you can never explain that to someone who isn't experienced enough. They just need to play. But you can tell them this, you have to trust me, this team will win from this setup. But you can never quite convey that because it's not so much. It's something that would take so much. I don't think you can represent it in a form of information that's kind of less than the sum of its parts. You just have to explain it all, and I don't think that wall of information is really like useful for someone who's not knowing what they're talking about.
Like the frustrating thing for me is I remember in the Reddit thread, there was even actually a chess player that came in because people were saying that the chess grandmaster thing wasn't accurate, and there was a high-rated chess player that went into the thread and he still got downvoted, trying to explain to people that they were actually wrong. Just because you can listen to a chess player tell you why a line is correct doesn't mean you understand it. It just means that you know what the person's saying and that you acknowledge that the person's saying something. Then someone listed the woman that explains like quantum mechanics or quantum computing from elementary to college, right? Okay. Well, what happens when she explains it to an elementary student and says, well, this is what's happening? The same way that I said, well, Jin Air's players are mechanically really good. And then the student goes, well, why are they good? And then she tries to go, well, they're good for this reason. They're like, yeah, but why is that reason make it so that they're good? And they can just play that game all day. And then she has to go even more into detail to try to explain it, but then it goes over their heads. Because basically the original problem is that they don't accept the actual simplified version. They refuse to accept it.
Sure.
And then when you keep trying to go deeper, then they try to counter with, oh, you just don't understand it simply.
Sure. I will just say, by the way, just as a very, very quick reply, everyone in that thread did I almost laughed myself to sleep reading that thread, because the people in the thread were all against LS, right? They all thought he's wrong, that you can't, you should explain it simply. Yet they all quoted a fucking Albert Einstein quote, and the logic was, well, if Albert Einstein says it, must be true, which is like they actually went against their own point. That was probably the maddest detail. And then secondly, it turned out the Albert Einstein quote was apocryphal. He never said it. And even the quote that was said wasn't exactly like you can explain anything to a child. It was something along the lines of like, in very specific circumstances, you should explain things like as simply as possible. Like once you got to the bottom of what their actual quote they were trying to quote was, it was nothing to do with what they originally said. Like no super intelligent genius level person ever said the phrase like, if you understand something, you should be able to explain it to a 5-year-old child. Like I can tell you, any field of expertise, I don't think anyone would say that who's an expert. Like you could, because as we've just suggested, even the words you say don't mean the same thing to someone who doesn't have the dictionary, the experience, understanding of basic techniques, mechanisms that interact with each other. If they don't know any of those things, what you're saying won't matter to them. Like, even if you boil it down to as simple as possible, you don't really know what that means. You just know what the simple version of it means. So I thought that was a whole side thing anyway. But anyway, I think we got to the bottom of this one. Wasn't really that spicy. Turns out you didn't disagree with that much, Ellis.
It's all right.
Yeah, I mean, I was more trying to. I guess like you can get someone on to disagree, but I was more just wondering, giving him a chance to explain how actually he was kind of basing the point from.
Okay. Right. Well, thanks anyway, mate.
It was informative. Thanks for answering.
Cheers.
Bye.
Right. So this was. It's up to you. You don't have to give your real alias if you want. What do you want us to call you?
Just orcs.
Orcs, as in like the hi-fi.
The cable, yeah.
Cable, exactly, right. So this guy's Orcs, and to be fair, you already put in chat who he is anyway, so some people will be aware. So what he said was, defending Jin Air is one thing, but where is the justification to say G2 were not as good? What did LS see G2 do that made him think, wow, they aren't that good? So are you fine with that initial question? Would like to rephrase it in any way, Orcs? It's up to you.
I'm fine with that open statement.
Okay. So what would you say to that, LS? On the G2 side of it, what is it that made you think that they could potentially lose to Jin Air? Why did you think they aren't that good from looking at them playing in Europe, etc.?
Well, because I didn't see enough things that made me say that they were good. I sort of view it from the other end of the spectrum, where I go into things expecting, or I go into things and I ask, show me why you're good. And there's like a standard, or how many good things can you actually do? I don't go into it saying, oh, you're a professional team. Let me see how many bad things I can find. So I think that's maybe where the issue can arise. So when I'm watching D2, I simply don't think that there was enough good things that I saw, and that was because I remember VOD reviewing a few of the games on stream, and I remember Broken Shard came in. Who else came in? Selfie came in. I think there was another EU player that came in as well. There was a few people that came in, and I remember talking about that G2 was in losing spots, or they were in losing map states. And they played out losing map states for several minutes, and the map states got progressively worse. They ended up winning. I remember one of the games was G2 versus, I think, Origin, and I think Origin had Zoe versus Ryzen mid, and there was just one of the worst Baron plays of all time in sequences. And seeing stuff like that unfold consistently throughout random LEC games, and obviously I'm not just talking about early split G2, I'm also talking about when they had the sub support. That's pretty much it.
Wait a minute, wait, one sec. I have to
camera's cuffed.
Why did you mention the part about when they had promiscue? G2 with promiscue was never involved in this, mate. Like, a lot of people would say they could lose. Like that.
No, I know.
That part.
But I think people think that me and the Koreans, because again, the Koreans were a part of the original clip, didn't watch Europe, but that just wasn't true. We did watch Europe. I would frequently talk with European players and stuff on meta picks and whatnot. Sometimes people would message us because of Malice playing Karthus and Kled and Tom Kench and whatnot in the jungle. So it wasn't like we weren't watching anything. In fact, we actually watched Europe more than NA. And then obviously one of our players is European, so one of the players were yeah.
He is European,
sense.
right? Anyway,
Yeah.
so Ox, what do you think of this, mate? There's a lot you can go into here. So where would you go from here?
I mean, I think this would be a more fair statement if you were discussing between the top teams. But I think based on Korea's lack of ability to adapt to like a faster meta, and the fact that they had such a poor performance at Worlds, I feel like you are holding the Korean teams to such a high standard still. And I feel like that's my statement now, is that you hold Korea to this glorious standard that sure they had a few years ago. They were amazing. But right now, I don't think that same standard's there. But I think you're still holding them to that. So you think if a team doesn't have excellent play, they could not do anything in Korea, when I think the faster paced play from G2, although it was messier, and sure there were points where you think that could be exploited, they definitely had a different style of play that wasn't sort of done in Korea, and as proved in MSI was the better style of play.
That's not true. I'll refer you to Sandbox, Dom1 Gaming, and Kingzone. Thanks.
Okay, but then still the top team SKT had a generally slower style of play.
But still, you just said that it didn't exist in Korea. I just listed you 3 teams that have an identical style. And in fact, on a previous show with Thorin, one of the European analysts even agreed with the mirror comparison of Sandbox being the Korean G2.
Okay, that's fair. But would you say that because it's a less dominant style, the region of Korea weren't as accomplished at it?
No.
Okay, I mean, I just feel like the fact that none of these Korean teams could dethrone SKT playing this slower style, yet
Some of them beat
G2, although it was a
SKT.
close series, well, I mean, they beat SKT, but they didn't manage to stop them from winning the whole thing. And then
Okay.
G2 seemed to have mastered their style. It was a sort of fluid way of playing the game with very interesting drafts, but also very aggressive. And sure, there were moments where it did look a bit int, but for the most part, they sort of had this style of play that did dominate Europe for them, which was completely different to SKT's. And then comparatively, it was more successful in the meta that we went into for MSI. But I mean, this is sort of going quite deep into how the play styles match up, but I just don't see how you can argue that G2 wouldn't have been able to beat not just SKT, because I think that would have been a fair argument going into MSI, that G2 would lose out to SKT, but to lose out to SKT and the second place, third place, fourth, every team to the point that they would be in relegations, it seems like a pretty bold statement to be able to assess. And it was just a fact. I think a lot of people disagree with the fact that, one, you went all in on a statement. You didn't say, I think that G2 might lose games to Gennaro or SKT. You said this is what would Gennaro or KT, sorry. You said this is what would happen. And then to follow up, when people ask for an explanation, you didn't specifically say this is what G2 did. I mean, you have said it now, the whole map state factor, but you didn't say this is what they've done and what they have to improve on if they're going to beat Gennaro and KT. So I feel like you just went a bit overboard with your statement. And I think I could understand it if it's to create controversy, but I just feel like, I mean, it wouldn't have blown up as much if you just said, I think G2 would lose to SKT. But I think that would have been a much more fair statement than saying G2 would have been in the bottom 4. So if I'm being honest, I think you just made the statement for controversy.
Man, it's really weird. I have a history of not saying things to be a contrarian.
Let me ask you a question though. I'll play devil's advocate on what he was kind of saying. And there was like a point I thought you were going to make, but you went away from it last second. So if you say, LS, that teams like you listed Sandbox, Damwon, and who was the other one? Kingzone, maybe?
Yeah.
As they're more aggressive, like G2-esque teams, as it were. So, I mean, the question that makes me ask is, why does Sandbox, Damwon, Kingzone all outplace Jin Green Wings if Jin Green Wings will beat G2? That implies that you basically think Sandbox, Damwon, Kingzone are presumably significantly better even at that style than G2, or have better players than G2. Doesn't it imply one of those?
I think that the margins are very thin. I think that LCK Spring was actually very chaotic for the bottom 4, and then the middle of the pack teams were relatively stable. Sandbox began to fall off in the later half of the split, and Kingzone began to ramp up. There's a lot of context, I guess, inside of the LCK standings, and then the manner in which they lost the games. I know what you're saying with if Sandbox and Kingzone, etc., are aggressive and they're more faster paced than some of the other LCK teams, then why would Jin and KT finish so far below them?
Do they have a factor that allows them to have that style, but for it to work consistently against the Jin Green Wings that G2 doesn't, in your opinion?
No, but I think that proposes a different question, right? It proposes, well, what happens Sandbox versus G2? Okay. Or what happens Kingzone versus G2? So that then we begin to enter into different conversations. And if you ask me that in April, I would say Sandbox would destroy. Sandbox and Kingzone would just beat G2.
So why would they if G2 wouldn't? Well, no, that's head to head. But why? I still don't get it. Why would those teams be better than Jin Air though if they're similar? Like even if they would beat G2, wouldn't that narrow the margin a bit?
What do you mean? I think I'm failing. I think I'm failing to understand something.
Yeah. What do you have any angle on this? Yeah, maybe you have something, Ox. What do you think?
Because you said that in April, your perception was that G2 would lose to Sandbox. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you think that between April and MSI, that G2 got better, that Korea got worse, or that your statement was, and it might be to lack of information, but your statement was wrong?
I think that my assessment up until that point was wrong.
Okay, fair. I think that sort of sells it. That's the smoking gun.
Fair enough. That wasn't really that sexy.
No, but I'll take it.
Whatever. Take the L on that one, I guess. Is that the end? Is that nothing more to it?
People say I can't say those words. It's really weird. But I already said that I wouldn't hold the same opinion if you asked me now today. So I've already indirectly said it.
I just felt like the original statement was overbold, and then you were unwilling to publicly defend it.
What about this, Alex? Like, there was a component when you made the question in Twitch chat, which was about like when you said, what did you see G2 do that made him think, wow, they aren't that good? He hasn't really addressed that part as much. Like, LS, you said that you don't think about it that way. You just think like, they didn't, like, you basically implied they didn't impress you enough, right?
Yeah.
So when you watched G2 play in LEC, you were like, this isn't impressive enough. Isn't what they did in LEC pretty similar to MSI?
No. And I also think that if you were to ask me if Sandbox and teams like that impressed me, the answer was no. And anyone that listened to me cast probably could have, known that as well. There's definitely highlights that teams do that can be impressive, but I think that the overall whole level of play wasn't really that impressive. In fact, I would often heavily criticize some of the middle-of-the-pack Korean teams for the way that they would begin faltering and their heavy reliance on their strengths in order to pull through and win games. So I guess that would mirror to G2.
Because here's the thing, I totally would get that to you don't like the style of play of Sandbox and you think they're too aggressive or they're just all-inning and coin flipping at times, etc. But like, it clearly worked, right? That's kind of what I was getting at with the earlier point, is that you can't say it didn't work in LCK. Sandbox at one point was number 2 in the league for like half the season.
Yeah, they were.
Obviously, by the end, King's Own was almost in the finals. Like, they had a chance. So, is that one of the reasons that the statement's now wrong? Do you now have a different perspective on how the game should be played? Like, you thought they were misplaying, but actually it was effective?
There's no Korea's a better way, China's a better way, EU's, NA's a better way. There's 10 champions on a screen. These plays can be made, they can't be made. It's just happened to be that historically across several esports titles, Korea was most in line with it. That's pretty much it. I mean, Korea, even at Worlds in, was it 2018? The arguments that we got into on was it Thorn and Loco, the show or whatnot. I brought up the argument about wards because everyone was like, oh, there's less wards.
Sure.
And I pulled up the stats and I said, well, that's weird. Stats don't agree. And then I said, well, in this freeze frame, the Korean team has absolute vision and they handshake on a losing fight. So the Korean team was in what a freeze frame would probably, many players. I mean, it was a huge thing during Worlds. Tons of pro players came on stream. Me and Loco talked on stream, etc. There were lots of people that agreed this Korean team just shouldn't fight here. And it wasn't that they were fighting into fog of war, that they were face checking or anything like that. They had absolute intel, and yet they still handshook a losing fight. So when you're in winning map states, but you make poor decisions despite having got to the winning map state, it doesn't mean that how you played up until that point was bad. If I'd make an analogy that maybe only you and a handful of people in chat would get, but if the Terran player, out-expanded the Protoss and everything, but then decides not to siege in a team fight and their whole fucking army gets blown to shit, it doesn't mean that the Terran player played worse. He just didn't siege for some fucking unholy reason. He didn't use EMP Shockwave on his science vessel. But I think that then the problem arises is how many people actually realize that the team was in a winning spot. Like, for instance, SKT versus G2, the first win or something. SKT was in a winning game spot. And they get a bright idea to try to go for some sort of a team fight when there's no realistic neutral objective up. They have absolute intel There's no fucking Fog of War shenanigans going on. And fucking Clid decides that he's going to run several hundred, range in front of his carries. Teddy gets caught by a fucking cocoon. Mod is getting all jittery and shit. And it's just bad play. But the map state was okay. I don't like these terms that are thrown around that like, oh, China's the best way to play, EU's the best way to play, NA's the... No, it doesn't... The map fucking is either in a winning or a losing state. Sometimes teams are going to play it better than other teams, just historically. And I mean, this isn't even arguable, right? Korea dominated League of Legends for so many fucking years. Korea was always closest to it.
All right, what about this then? Since I want to see, like, this will probably be the last call. So, like, Ox, what about this? What is your background? I mean, you're from the UK, right? So you're a European League of Legends fan, presumably?
Yeah, I used to play in... Obviously, you had Prosfan before. I used to play in the same league as him, and now I cast
fair
it.
enough. Okay, what was that? UK Premier League or something? ESL UK or something? What is it?
Yeah, it's now called the UKLC with LVP UK.
Right, okay, so you're a player. Okay, you played at like a semi-pro level then. One of the things that your question implied to me, at least, which should be the first thing I assumed, is, are you a big fan of G2's style of play? Do you think it's very good?
No, I mean, to be honest, I was of the opinion that I thought SKT... I mean, when I was coming into MSI, I was of the opinion that I would like SKT to do well because I'm a big fan of theirs, but I thought IG had the raw talent in their lanes to come ahead.
Yeah.
So if LS had come out and said, I think G2 will not win MSI, I'd have been like, yeah, I agree with you. But it was just the fact that it was so much further than that. It'd gone so much further than the line. And I think that maybe, I mean, this is just me saying something. So
that's fine.
I feel like maybe you're too focused on these snapshots, these game states, that you don't look at the game beyond that and how they develop from there. Because it's clear that, some teams are very good at setting up these favorable map states. G2, as you said, weren't, but G2 managed to find winning situations despite being at a disadvantage. And maybe the argument could be made that Korea, or at least the team that Korea sent, SKT, aren't that good at finding the winning plays when they're in the losing game state, whereas teams like G2 are.
I mean, basically, LS, like, that does tie into something else I think people criticized you on this issue, which is that, like, so when I actually said I could understand and reverse engineer what I thought you were thinking when you said that statement, I had a similar point to how you said it. I said I could imagine there's a point in the game that LS saw Jin Air Green Wings, and he was like, actually, this macro move was good, and maybe G2 wouldn't make it, and therefore they'd win the game against them. But that's a very, very specific example. It's like, first you'd have to get into that state, and then we're even assuming that they correctly execute out of it. Whereas actually, Jin Air, some of their players are good, some of them aren't that good. So, like, it's still a bit of a reach even to imagine that they close the game, even if they got into that initial position first, isn't it? Is it not?
I mean,
yeah.
I think we're agreeing with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's fine.
What about this though? Do you think, Ox, that he's like downplaying the actual like level of the G2 players though?
I think to a degree, yeah. I think that it does seem like, especially when you had the statement earlier today, which was that, there's players in Europe and NA who don't reach as high elo in Korea, is that you still have this view that Korea are the better individual players, when I would argue, particularly with the likes of Wonder, I think he's shown that you could make the argument that he is at least top 2 in the world coming out of MSI. And I think it's no longer the point that Korean players are the best in all situations. And I do agree that they still have a majority, because even a lot of teams that were at MSI still use Korean players. But I think that
then Korean players are the best.
Korean players should win.
I mean,
you're talking
we're making two different issues, aren't we? Like,
No, but I'm not saying
all Koreans are the best, but his point is like Wonder could be as good as almost any Korean, right?
No, I mean, my argument's not even that Wonder could be as good. I think
he is as good.
I think arguably better, because I think Wonder at the tournament showed that people could make the statement that Wonder was the best top in the world coming out of MSI. And I think that, yes, there are still a lot of good Koreans, but I think that you can no longer say that just because its player is Korean that he is number one. I think people still have that concept.
I think we've got the premise, mate. So LS, I would rephrase it like this. If I ask you about one of the players you're a huge fan of, Bwipo, Licorice, people that you consider to be top talents, I'm sure Wonder might even be in there. People you consider to be top talents. Why do you are you only talking about the way the teams play? Because surely, I would say, come on, man, G2's players individually, most of their players, with the exception of maybe the AD carry, are better than the Korean equivalent in generic green wings, right?
Yeah.
So if they have better players and their style of play did prove to be pretty effective, like that was a bit of a reach overall, wasn't it?
Well, it comes down to the marginal thing, right? That I mentioned between like Sandbox and KT Junior. I think that over a very large sample size, marginal skill differences is very difficult to exert over opponents.
Right.
I mean, we see this in StarCraft, right, all the time. With the exception being the fucking gods, right? Like Flash, Jaedong, and all of them. I mean, even in that, right? Remember, you were almost considered a god player if you had a 60% win rate.
Of course, yeah.
So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
I will point out, it's actually also, here's an interesting bit of info you might want to use in the future. It's also apparently very similar with tennis, believe it or not. Like, if you look at the top players, supposedly it's something mental. Like, the guy who's like the ultimate champion and the guy who would finish like 10th, you know, like what the champion guy wins like, 2% more points in a game than the other one. It's just that when you average out over the scoring system in enough games, that makes them win quite a lot of games and they're the champion. It's something mad like that as well. Like, the actual margins is a lot smaller than people probably realize.
I think as well done on the tennis analogy, because I used to play tennis quite a bit and watched it, and I think for then it was a lot about the consistency as well of the tennis players. Because you've seen players, and it's happened. There's been tournaments like Wimbledon where a player who's low ranked has just had an absolute blast of a tournament, and it's happened in league as well. Albus Knox was a big one where they had a great tournament, but it's about consistently putting out that performance and not just having that one tournament where you go, "Wow, look, we're actually a good team." Because it's undeniable that there are moments and there are certain metas where teams will play very well, but I think it's just the consistency that separates them from the greats.
Okay. Have we got through that topic all right, Orcs? Are you happy with that?
Yeah, I'm pretty happy.
All right, cheers, mate. I think that'll be the last one. I'll move you out here, but thanks anyway.
All right, cheers. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, cheers. Bye.
This video was kindly supported by Wendelful, Butt Pounder 420, Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, JDubs, Chi Mao, Daniel Olivar, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, Alexander Rao, and a special thanks go out to Jerky's Minion, weixz, don't know how to say that, it's like a Chinese name, and Max Laine. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my upcoming content? It's going to be a big feature in the next few months for me. Well, my Patreon, that's a feature. Do you want to ask me a question in my monthly AMA? Would you like teasers for my upcoming content? Find out who the next guests are. Maybe you want to take part in that monthly donator discussion with me. Well, if you want any of the above perks, put your money where your mouth is. Support me via the Patreon link below and join the Scrilluminati today.